Chapter 766. Although Old Man Qing Mu was not an internal energy cultivator who specialized in swordsmanship, he was the oldest among the 5 element altar masters. He was also the most experienced elder of the Blood Garment Pavilion. He had his own understanding of Nangong's current situation. Although Nangong's had gathered together for various reasons and coincidentally triggered Nangong's mental isolation, in essence, it was because Nangong's could not control himself and was unwilling to face reality directly. Although Nangong's expression did not change much, it was still noticeable. Frowning might not be a good emotion, but at least it proved that there was something that could stimulate Nangong's, allowing Nangong's emotions to break through the restraint that Nangong's had on his own will. As long as Elder Qing Mu could stimulate Nangong's will to a certain extent, then everything could be reversed. At this moment, Nangong's had actually fallen into an endless loop that he had set for himself. This did not mean that Nangong's was an inflexible person. Instead, it was because everyone's thinking was limited. No one was perfect. Even a normal person would inevitably make a lot of mistakes in their daily life, let alone a leader who had to deal with a lot of affairs every day and ensure that his strength would steadily improve and even surpass most people. My lord, I know you can hear me now. I am Qing Mu, the altar master of the Greenwood altar. Qing Mu attached his internal energy to his throat. Unlike Nangong's and Qi Yin, who used their internal energy to amplify their voices, Qing Mu used his internal energy to vibrate his throat constantly, giving his voice a strange charm. His voice rushed directly into Nangong's ears with a special wave. Although Nangong had weakened his 5 senses and could only hear some noises, Qing Mu's voice was like a knife that directly pierced through all obstacles and rushed into Nangong's mind. Qing Mu? Nangong, who was immersed in his own mind, suddenly heard Qing Mu's voice clearly. He was slightly stunned. After all, even Nangong could not break free from his self-imposed isolation. When he suddenly heard Qing Mu's voice, Nangong naturally hoped that Qing Mu, a veteran of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, would have a way to solve the problem that was happening to him. My lord, are you still not waking up? Although I don't particularly understand what kind of plan you have in mind, but this kind of situation where almost all the elite disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion have been exhausted is definitely not something that you have expected. Although Qing Mu's words did not directly reprimand Nangong's, his tone was rather stiff. Obviously, he was quite upset. When Nangong first came to the Blood Cloak Pavilion, it was Qing Mu who first accepted Nangong as the successor of the banishment, the master of the Heavenly Calamity Sword, and the future head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Even when the other 5 elements altar masters wanted Nangong to take the Dragon Transformation Road test, Qing Mu himself was biased towards Nangong. Now that the most senior and most stable person in the Blood Cloak Pavilion had begun to resent Nangong, what kind of attitude would the other people in the Blood Cloak Pavilion have towards Nangong? Nangong could not help but begin to worry. Although he was very confident that he had recruited many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion over the years, and he could vaguely sense that the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were fighting a bloody battle, Nangong could not help but begin to doubt himself after hearing Qing Mu's words. He was worried that his many years of effort and management would directly go to waste because of this mistake. The reason why Nangong suddenly had such a psychological change was that Nangong was currently in an endless loop of his own thoughts. All the words that entered Nangong's mind would be forcibly put into his own endless loop by Nangong. Then he would use this endless loop to attack himself. However, the more important reason was the sound technique that Qing Mu used at this moment. This technique was not very common in the Blood Cloak Pavilion. It was a special attack called demonic sound. However, it was only useful when the opponent's mental state was extremely weak, or when there was an obvious flaw in the opponent's mental state. This kind of weak ability was particularly difficult to use. If one was not careful, the meridians in the neck would be damaged. If it was more serious, it could even directly take the user's life. Qing Mu had accidentally found such a secret book in the Blood Cloak Pavilion's library. With his extremely strong recovery ability and his extremely steady character, he slowly honed this demonic sound while constantly suffering from minor injuries. Now that Nangongzhi was in a state of self-doubt, Qing Mu naturally directly used the demonic sound to directly trigger the flaw in Nangongzhi's mind, causing Nangongzhi to doubt himself again. It's not that I don't want to go out. It's not that I don't want to. Even though Nangongzhi was in the mental world, his eyes directly turned scarlet, and even his body became distorted. Suddenly, the originally pitch-black mental world suddenly emitted a popping sound, which was like a bubble bursting. It was enough to show how excited Nangongzhi was at this moment. However, Qing Mu, who was in the outside world, could not see the changes in Nangongzhi's mental world. He could only see Nangongzhi's constantly changing facial expression. Therefore, Qing Mu naturally thought that his method was effective. He directly used the demonic sound again to invade Nangongzhi's mind, and gave him a strong dose of medicine. Overestimating your so-called cleverness and regarding others as chess pieces in your hands. In the end, you completely fail to see your own weakness. This is unwise. Placing the lives of everyone in the Blood Cloak Pavilion on the scale and directly destroying the future of the internal strength cultivators is disloyal. After encountering difficulties, you only know how to blindly escape. Even at a time like this, you still tightly lock yourself in your own mental world. This is unrighteous, unwise, disloyal, and unrighteous. What right do you have to sit in the position of the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion? Chapter 767. Most of the time, people would do bad things with good intentions. The reason why Elder Qing Mu said so many words to hurt Nangongzhi's heart was that he wanted to stimulate Nangongzhi, so that Nangongzhi could regain control of his body. However, Elder Qing Mu had spent too little time with Nangongzhi. Although he had a certain understanding of Nangongzhi based on his subjective impression, he knew nothing about Nangongzhi's hidden personality. Elder Qing Mu thought that Nangongzhi was tough enough to face all misunderstandings, so he directly said those words to Nangongzhi. If Mashiro, Nangongro, Little Linger, or even Bisui were beside Elder Qing Mu, they would immediately stop Elder Qing Mu's actions. Dragons had a reverse scale, and those who touched it would die. Nangongzhi also had his reverse scale. Those things that Nangongzhi did not care about had no effect on Nangongzhi. However, once Nangongzhi believed that those who trusted him had doubts about him, Nangongzhi would also suffer a great blow. The Blood Cloak Pavilion was such an existence for Nangongzhi. However, Elder Qing Mu had deliberately misled Nangongzhi with his demonic sound, and let this mistake directly pass through Nangongzhi's mind. This cycle of death was even worse. This was not helping Nangongzhi. Instead, it was worsening the accident that happened to Nangongzhi, making Nangongzhi's current state more dangerous. Who is unwise? Who is unfaithful? Who is unrighteous? In Nangongzhi's spiritual world, Nangongzhi fell into a kind of madness because of Elder Qing Mu's demonic sound. This madness made Nangongzhi beat his head with both hands, and his eyes turned red. Crack! A faint but clear sound echoed in Nangongzhi's spiritual world. Nangongzhi's instinctive restraint on himself was directly broken by Nangongzhi's deep madness. On the battlefield, Nangongzhi's body also opened his eyes. However, his black and white eyeballs had turned red and black. This pair of eyes was obviously not something that a normal person could have. Scarlet light shot out from Nangongzhi's opened eyes, and a violent demonic aura emanated from Nangongzhi's body. Not good. Although Elder Qing Mu didn't know how wrong he was, he could tell that Nangongzhi wasn't in a good state. On the contrary, it was extremely similar to the scene that Elder Qing Mu had seen when an internal force cultivator turned into a demonic state. Seal. As soon as Elder Qing Mu sensed that something was wrong, he directly stimulated all the internal force in his body and directly wrapped it around Nangongzhi's body. The internal force turned into small needles and pierced into Nangongzhi's major acupuncture points. Elder Qing Mu was currently using his internal force to guide the violent power in Nangong's body out of Nangong's body. He hoped that this method would prevent the violent internal force from destroying Nangong's body. At the same time, he also wanted to prevent Nangongja from turning into a demonic state and starting a crazy massacre. When Nangongja woke up, there was a big movement. The scarlet light emitted from his eyes directly condensed and rushed into the sky. On the battlefield, whether it was the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion or the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces, they all saw the two beams of light and Nangongja's opened eyes. Seeing that Nangongja had woken up, the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion were naturally happy. Although their leader didn't seem to be in a good state, at least their leader had opened his eyes and was exuding a terrifying aura. As long as he was still alive, there was still a chance. At this moment, the pressure in the hearts of the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces became even greater. After all, it was obvious that the Ninja Allied Forces were at a disadvantage in the battle between the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the Ninja Allied Forces. Once a powerhouse like Nangongja joined the battle, not to mention Nangongja's full strength, even if he only recovered half of his strength, it would be enough to kill the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces. With the morale rising, the Ninja Allied Forces were naturally suppressed even more fiercely. Even though Naruto had tried his best to protect the Ninja Allied Forces in the battle with Sasuke, a large number of ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces were directly killed by the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. Because of the death of a large number of ninjas, the blood was directly thrown on the ground, and the smell of blood in the air became stronger. A large amount of the smell of blood was like gasoline directly pouring into Nangong's already unconscious mind. The scarlet light emitted from his eyes became even more dazzling. Nangong's body also began to struggle madly under the situation where his acupoints were pierced by the inner strength. However, the more Elder Aoki restrained Nangongja with internal force, the more he understood how dangerous and terrifying Nangongja's situation was at this moment. He could only clench his teeth and use all the strength in his body to temporarily suppress Nangongja's movements. After the battle with the 6 Kage-level ninjas, Elder Aoki began to inject his internal force into Nangongja's body to stabilize Nangongja's injury. At this moment, because Nangongja suddenly turned into a demon, Elder Aoki also consumed a lot of his internal force. Even though Elder Aoki had cultivated for many years, and his internal force was very strong, he couldn't withstand such consumption. At this moment, Elder Aoki's face also became pale. After checking the internal force in his body, Elder Aoki estimated that he could only keep Nangongja immobile for about 5 minutes. After this time, Nangongja would regain his freedom, and then no one would be able to restrict Nangongja's movements. Suddenly, a powerful force erupted from Nangongja's body and began to directly attack Elder Aoki's internal force. This restriction once again shortened the time that Elder Aoki could restrain Nangongja. At the same time, it also allowed Nangongja to gain control of part of his body, such as his mouth. Murderous intent, sword energy, internal force, evil spirit, and various other abilities directly gathered in Nangongja's mouth. A simple character directly burst out from Nangongja's mouth, and a chill rose in the hearts of everyone on the battlefield. Kill! Chapter 768. When Nangongja uttered the word kill, the long-awaited Yama's shadow appeared behind Nangongja. The ferocious Yama stood quietly behind Nangongja. However, everyone who heard Nangongja's kill vaguely saw a king of hell standing in front of them and staring at them. It was as if he was judging what kind of sin they had committed and what kind of method they should use to make them pay for their sins. However, the Yama's shadow only flashed by. It was completely triggered by the killing intent in Nangongja's heart. Everyone only saw it for a brief moment. Without the support of Nangongja's power, it also disappeared. However, Elder Qingmu, who was the closest to Nangongja, was obviously more affected than the others. After all, Elder Qingmu was currently restraining Nangongja's movements against Nangongja's will. If it wasn't for the fact that Elder Qing Mu didn't have any malicious intent towards Nangongzhe, it was very likely that Elder Qing Mu would have been killed by the killing intent of the Yama Shadow when it appeared. Even so, Elder Qing Mu's head became extremely dizzy at this moment. All the guilt that Elder Qing Mu thought he had long forgotten surfaced in his mind. At this moment, Elder Qing Mu was unable to concentrate on using his internal force to restrict Nangongzhe's movements. Just as Old Man Qing Mu could no longer maintain his consciousness, a rather rough voice reverberated in Old Man Qing Mu's mind. Suppress. It was just a simple word, but at this moment, it seemed to have received a response from heaven and earth. It directly suppressed all the chaos in Elder Qing Mu's mind. Elder Qing Mu opened his eyes and suddenly saw a stalwart man in a black cloak standing beside Nangongzhe. The man's hair and beard were fluttering, and he had a pair of round eyes. However, for some reason, this man's figure seemed somewhat illusory. I think you'll probably guessed who I am. I am Black Lion Liang, the familiar beast of the Blood-Robed Pavilion's current leader. That's right, the man who suddenly appeared beside Nangongzhe and used a mantra to suppress the chaos in Elder Qing Mu's mind was Black Lion Liang. In the previous battle, Nangongzhe had summoned Black Lion Liang to fight. However, there were many old, young, and women of the Blood-Robed Pavilion left behind by Nangongzhe in the Lion Clan Different Space. In order to maintain the stability of the Lion Clan Different Space, Black Lion Liang had directly returned to the Different Space to suppress it. Even now, Liang felt that Nangongzhe was not in a normal state through the lion head seal that he had established with Nangongzhe. He tried his best to force his will to descend upon Nangongzhe's side. Of course, Elder Qing Mu of the Blood-Robed Pavilion greets the sacred beast. When Black Lion Liang heard Elder Qing Mu calling him a sacred beast, he was shocked. However, the shock only lasted for a moment before it was suppressed. Although his relationship with the Blood-Robed Pavilion was not well known, there must be some records in the ancient books of the Blood-Robed Pavilion. He had never deliberately hidden his identity, so it was not impossible for an old man like Elder Qing Mu to know his past identity. It's all in the past, so let's not talk about it. Right now, I'm just Nangong's familiar beast. I'm just fighting alongside him. The reason why I'm here isn't because of anything else. I'm here to solve the complicated situation Nangongzhe is in. Do whatever I say. Otherwise, Nangongzhe might really turn into a demon and never be able to recover. Elder Qing Mu nodded in response. Perhaps the young juniors weren't aware of the identity of Liang, who called himself a familiar beast. However, Elder Qing Mu, who had read all the ancient books in the Blood-Robed Pavilion, knew that Liang was the one who fought alongside the Blood-Robed Pavilion's ancestor. Liang naturally wouldn't harm the Blood-Robed Pavilion, the faction created by the Banishment Pavilion, nor would he harm Nangongzhe, the successor of the Banishment Pavilion. Please enlighten me, Your Excellency Liang. I will do my best to fulfill your request. Liang nodded slowly. After all, Qing Mu had been very steady and calm ever since Liang appeared. Even though Nangongzhe was in a critical situation, Qing Mu didn't lose his composure. Therefore, Liang wasn't worried about Qing Mu's ability to execute Li Yang's orders perfectly. Instead, Liang glanced at the Calamity Sword beside Nangongzhe and sent a portion of his mental strength into the sword to communicate with the sword's spirit. Continue to condense your internal strength into needles and pierce the acupoints with your internal strength. Do you understand? Liang didn't care whether Qing Mu responded to her question or not. Instead, she continued to spew out the names of the acupuncture points and the depth of the stab like a cannonball at Qing Mu. Foot Taiyang Bladder Meridian Spleen Acupoint. 1 CUN 3 Fun. Stomach Meridian Foot 3 Li Acupoint. 2 CUN 1 Fun. Ren Meridian Shanzhong Acupoint. 1 Fin 2 CUN. 9 acupoints were listed in a row, and the depth of the needles was precisely specified. This greatly increased the difficulty of Elder Qing Mu's acupuncture. His pale face became even paler. Even his hair seemed to have dried up due to the great exhaustion of his spirit and body. You don't have to do the last acupoint. but you must ensure that the first 9 needles don't dissipate. Liang didn't know if it was because she saw that Qing Mu had consumed too much energy and was afraid that Qing Mu's treatment would fail because of her weakness, or because she didn't intend to let Qing Mu proceed with the last step. She directly asked Qing Mu to stop the acupuncture and stand aside to rest. Aoki had a lot of trust in Liang. Since Liang asked him to stand aside, he immediately sat down and began to recover the large amount of internal energy in his body. Chapter 769. Old man Qing Mu, who had used up a lot of energy, didn't have the strength to continue using his internal energy and stabilize the golden needles. So, he could only leave the last part to Liang. Liang closed his eyes and urged his mental power to infiltrate the Tribulation Sword. He used all kinds of methods to communicate with the sword spirit contained in the Tribulation Sword. The Sword of Calamity did have its own spirituality, the so-called sword spirit. However, even after so many years of nurturing, the sword spirit still only had a very simple intelligence. If it wasn't for the close relationship between Liang and the banishment, the sword spirit wouldn't have instinctively rejected Liang. Liang's mental power might have been torn to shreds by the tribulation lightning contained in the Sword of Calamity. Facing an existence like this that didn't have complete intelligence, Liang naturally couldn't expect it to easily understand him. So, he could only use different methods to make the Sword of Calamity understand him. Under Liang's constant persuasion, the Sword of Calamity's spirituality was stimulated. The body of the Sword of Calamity trembled like a child who was paralyzed on the ground and wanted to use its small arms and legs to stand up. It seemed a little clumsy, but it was exceptionally patient. That's right, Sword of Calamity. Just like that, he slowly controlled his body to stand upright. Then, he floated in the air and listened to my commands. Only by following my instructions will your master be able to regain his consciousness and not become a puppet controlled by his own evil thoughts. Liang continuously used his mental power to encourage the sword spirit in the Sword of Calamity, and repeatedly emphasized that the Sword of Calamity should listen to his orders. As a sword spirit, although its intelligence wasn't complete, it was because its intelligence was relatively weak that it was more sensitive to other people's mental fluctuations. At this moment, the person who was constantly encouraging him didn't have any evil intentions in his heart. Instead, he had a hint of intimacy with him. That was why the sword spirit listened to Liang and constantly controlled his body to complete Liang's requests. As the Heavenly Tribulation Sword Spirit continued to work hard, the Heavenly Tribulation Sword's body actually became vertical, as Liang had requested. The hilt was facing up while the tip was facing down. It was constantly rotating on its own. A sharp aura was emitted from the Heavenly Tribulation Sword. Now float 1 foot above the ground and aim 1.5 inches below your master's navel. Liang's order came again. The Sword of Calamity didn't know where the tip of its sword was aiming at. 1.5 inches below the navel wasn't an unimportant acupuncture point. Instead, it was an acupuncture point that was close to the foundation of internal strength cultivators, the sea of breath point. A large amount of internal strength was accumulated in such an acupuncture point. Internal strength cultivators relied on expanding the capacity of the sea of breath point and widening the width of their meridians to increase their strength. Now, Liang had the sword spirit of calamity directly aim at the Qihai acupoint, which was the foundation of internal energy cultivators. Qing Mu, who was meditating beside Nangong, immediately stopped meditating. He immediately jumped up from his meditating position and reached out his hand to grab the sword spirit of calamity. He wanted to stop the sword spirit of calamity from piercing such an important acupoint. He wanted to ask Liang what he was thinking to do such a thing. At this moment, Liang's eyes were fixed on Nangong's sea of breath point. No one knew what he was thinking or calculating. He ignored Qing Mu's attempt to grab the sword of calamity with his own hand. The sword of calamity had its own consciousness, the sword of calamity's spirit. Anyone who wanted to touch the sword of calamity would be attacked by the Sword of Calamity's Thunder of Calamity under the control of the Sword of Calamity's spirit. Qingmu naturally reached out to grab the hilt of the Sword of Calamity, so he bore the brunt of the powerful thunder rushing into his body. Lightning itself had a powerful, paralyzing, and invasive property. At this moment, Old Man Qingmu had already entered a state of extreme exhaustion due to his various actions. Under the effects of the lightning's paralysis and his own exhaustion, Old Man Qingmu fell into a coma. Only his hand, which was holding onto the hilt of the Heavenly Tribulation Sword, seemed to be tightly holding onto the sword due to the stimulation of the lightning. Now, Li Yang's eyes, which had been empty and lifeless, suddenly shone brightly. Because the Heavenly Tribulation Sword had suddenly released the Heavenly Punishment Lightning because of Old Man Qingmu's actions, Nangong's internal energy, which had a certain degree of affinity with the Heavenly Punishment Lightning, was affected by it and began to boil. Liang also stared at this moment. He directly sent his mental power into the Heaven's Calamity Sword and poured all the energy he used to maintain the Phantom into the Heaven's Calamity Sword. He issued a final command to the Heaven's Calamity Sword's spirit. Stab here a little. The Sword of Calamity's spirit immediately executed the order and stabbed Nangong's sea of breath point after receiving Li Yang's order. Li Yang disappeared due to the exhaustion of energy. Qingmu couldn't speak because he had fallen into a coma. The Sword of Calamity didn't have complete intelligence, so it naturally had a way to speak. However, at this moment, a sharp female voice suddenly rang out on the battlefield. Qingmu, you old bastard. How dare you? At this moment, Qingmu's posture was too misleading. His hand was tightly holding the Sword of Calamity, and his face was lowered so that no one could see his expression. The sword was already stabbed into Nangong's abdomen, and the wound was still bleeding. No matter how one looked at it, it was Qingmu who directly stabbed the Sword of Calamity into Nangong's abdomen. He wanted to take Nangong's life. Bai Shui, who had been fighting the allied forces with Qi Yin and Ho Tu on the main battlefield, occasionally looked back at Qingmu's situation. He just happened to see Qingmu directly stabbing the Sword of Calamity into Nangong's abdomen. Bai Shui, who had always been very calm, no longer had his usual calmness after seeing this scene. Instead, he roared in the direction of Old Man Qingmu as if he had exploded. Chapter 770. Bai Shui's roar attracted the attention of all the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Alliance to Old Man Aoki. Almost everyone saw the scene of Old Man Aoki directly stabbing the Tribulation Sword into Nangong's body. Everyone was shocked, speechless by this scene. After all, Old Man Aoki could be said to be a model of virtue and prestige in the Bloodcloth Pavilion. At this moment, he actually stabbed his own head with a long sword. However, just when everyone was surprised, Nangongja, who was lying on the ground and seemingly unable to move, suddenly stretched out a hand and grabbed the Tribulation Sword. The sharp Tribulation Sword was tightly held by Nangongja, but it didn't cut Nangongja's hand. Instead, it seemed to be very excited and trembled slightly. Okay, calm down a little. I'm still injured here. If you move around, it won't be so easy to recover. Nangong's slightly weak but exceptionally gentle voice directly transmitted to everyone's ears. Bai Shui, who was slowly filled with anger, heard Nangong's voice at this moment, and her anger turned into drops of tears that directly overflowed from her eyes. After hearing Nangong's words, the Tribulation Sword seemed to be afraid that its movement would worsen Nangong's injury, so it also quieted down. Nangongja gently placed his hand on Old Man Qingmu's hand, which was gripping the hilt of the Calamity Sword because of his tight muscles. A thick stream of internal force was transmitted into Old Man Qingmu's body just like that, making Old Man Qingmu's nerves, which had been tense due to the passage of lightning, relax. Old Man Aoki's muscles suddenly relaxed, and his entire body collapsed to the ground because of the lack of support. At this moment, Everyone saw old man Aoki's pale and aged face because of excessive consumption. The moment Bai Shui saw old man Aoki's complexion, her heart was filled with guilt. After all, old man Aoki's current condition was extremely bad. It was obvious that he had used up a lot of his source energy to deal with Nangong's problem. If he couldn't replenish his source energy in the future, it was very likely that old man Aoki's lifespan would be greatly shortened. Nangongja reached out and grabbed the tribulation sword's hilt, directly pulling it out of his body. He stroked the wound left by the tribulation sword with his other hand, and a thick internal force directly adhered to the wound, stopping the bleeding and constantly helping the wound heal. Nangongja's mind and body were indeed controlled by the murderous aura and all kinds of dangerous energy in his body, because he was possessed by the devil. However, old man Aoki's 9 precise acupuncture points directly channeled the chaotic energy in Nangongja's body, preventing Nangongja's state of being possessed by the devil from spreading. However, the most important thing was the last stab of the tribulation sword. This stab directly touched Nangongja's dantian, which contained a large amount of internal force. However, it didn't pierce through it and just touched the edge of the dantian. The moment it touched the dantian, the energy that Li Yang injected into the tribulation sword at the last moment was directly transmitted to Nangongja's dantian. The moment the energy that contained Li Yang's will entered Nangongja's dantian, it began to display its own power. Lions were ferocious, unstoppable, and intimidating. They were the king of all beasts. Li Yang, as the black lion among lions, was able to display the unique characteristics of a lion to the extreme, such as bravery and deterrence. Li Yang's power had the special ability to suppress evil spirits. Being possessed by the devil was a phenomenon that occurred when the power in one's body lost control and stimulated the ferocious nature in one's body. When Li Yang's power entered Nangongja's body, it immediately formed a powerful force with internal force and began to fight the evil spirit in Nangongja's body. Although both sides consumed some energy in the process, the evil spirit in Nangongja's body was successfully suppressed. This could be seen from Nangongja's eyes that had returned to normal. After the evil spirit in his body was suppressed, Nangongja's will also directly awakened. Nangongja glanced at old man Qingmu, who had fallen to the ground. He didn't put on any airs and directly went to old man Qingmu's side to help him up. Then, he beckoned a disciple of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and handed old man Qingmu to him. Then, he walked directly to the center of the battlefield. There was a great terror between life and death. The evil spirit controlling one's body was a phenomenon that drifted between life and death. It was precisely because of this great terror that Nangongja's mental state had a breakthrough. At Nangongja's level, the accumulation of internal force was not so important. Every breakthrough in mental state could bring about the greatest benefits to a person. Nangongja slowly walked to the center of the battlefield step by step. The momentum on his body also became stronger and stronger. Nangongja's sword domain was opened little by little. The sword domain's auxiliary ability was greater than its offensive ability. At this moment, it had become extraordinarily powerful. Everyone who was wrapped in Nangongja's sword domain felt an unstoppable, powerful edge waiting for an opportunity to strike. Looking at the huge purple Susanoo floating in the sky, the 3 altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and the many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion who were constantly fighting with the allied forces, Nangongja directly said to everyone, "Everyone, stop attacking now." Although it was not so clear why Nangongja issued such an order, many ninjas of the Blood Cloak Pavilion had a kind of instinctive obedience to Nangongja. The moment they heard Nangongja's order, they immediately stopped attacking. Even if the opposite ninja may be stabbing towards them at this moment, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion still directly withdrew the weapons in their hands. Of course, Nangongja couldn't let the people on his side stop attacking without any precaution. Almost at the moment when Nangongja issued the order to stop attacking, the powerful sword domain around Nangongja's body was directly released, enveloping everyone on the battlefield. The ninjas of the allied forces were directly surrounded by the sword chi derived from the sword domain. Once they made the slightest move to attack, they would be directly strangled by the sword chi. Chapter 771. For ordinary ninjas, Nangong's Kenjutsu, sword energy, even if it's only one, is fatal. When a large number of Kenjutsu's Kenjutsu sword domain is wrapped around them, they naturally don't dare to act rashly because of fear of Kenjutsu sword energy. For the 6 Kage-level powerhouses led by the Woodleaf Sannin and the 3 Kage-level powerhouses, although they weren't so afraid of Nangong's sword chi, these powerful people had been in high positions for many years and also had a very far-reaching political vision. After the awakening of a super powerhouse like Nangong, the Bloodcloth Pavilion had already taken the initiative of the entire battle. It was obviously an easy victory, but Nangong directly gave up and ordered the entire Bloodcloth Pavilion to stop the attack. Such behavior was beyond everyone's imagination. Since Nangong had issued such an order, then naturally, he had to give all the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion who were loyal to him an explanation. Otherwise, even if Nangong had a high prestige in the Bloodcloth Pavilion, it was still possible for him to face the situation of being betrayed. Just when everyone was waiting for Nangong to give them an explanation, Nangong didn't disappoint everyone's expectations. He directly walked to the center of the battlefield with the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. The disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion naturally stared closely at Nangong, the head of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, while many ninjas of the ninja allied forces couldn't move at will because of the sword chi binding them. Disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and ninjas of the ninja allied forces, I believe that I don't need to introduce myself too much. I am Nangong, the head of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. I believe that now you are quite puzzled by my direct request for the entire Bloodcloth Pavilion to stop the battle and use sword chi to bind the ninjas, but you don't have to worry, I will naturally slowly tell you my own thoughts. Nangong held the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand. His body did not emit the slightest bit of malice. He only used a pair of indifferent eyes to look at the ninja allied army and the Bloodcloth Pavilion who were participating in the battle. His eyes were slowly filled with an inexplicable compassion. At this moment, Nangong did not hide the emotions in his eyes. Instead, everyone could see that his eyes were gradually becoming more compassionate. Originally, the reason why I took the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to fight against the Ninja Coalition Army was very simple. Our Blood Garment Pavilion's development has reached a bottleneck. This kind of peace does not only come from the Blood Garment Pavilion's internal problems, but also from the external environment. Although the ninja world isn't small, it's not that big either. While accommodating 5 behemoths, the 5 major ninja villages, it's impossible to accommodate another behemoth of the same size. Nangong's eyes swept over the 3 Kages, Gara, Mei, and A, who were standing in the ninja allied army. After being met by Nangong's eyes, the 3 Kages also couldn't help but show some approval. As the Kages of the ninja villages, no one knows better than them that such a big cake like the ninja world is not so big. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a ninja world war for various reasons. I don't just represent myself. From the moment I wore the blood-red robes and held the heavenly calamity sword in my hand as the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, I didn't just represent myself. I also represented countless disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion, not only for myself, but also for the thousands of disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I have no choice but to fight and fight for more benefits for them. Even if it goes against my own will, I will not hesitate. Perhaps the ninjas of the ninja allied forces didn't know how much Nangong had done for the Bloodcloth Pavilion, but the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion were very clear about how much Nangong had done for the Bloodcloth Pavilion. If it wasn't for Nangong's contributions to the Bloodcloth Pavilion over the years, even if the Bloodcloth Pavilion was an organization with great potential, it would be impossible for it to develop so quickly. So after hearing Nangong's words, many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion couldn't help but be moved. Maybe you don't know why I fainted just now. It's not because of any physical damage, but because I heard some words of the fourth Hokage wave Watergate. It touched my own will. I began to think deeply about whether I should stick to my own will or give up part of my will for the sake of the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. To be honest, even now, I haven't found a perfect answer to this question, because whether it's public interest or selfishness, it's a part of my mood. If I can't face and accept such a mood, then I'm really irresponsible to myself. Ninjas pursue the ninja path that they set for themselves. Such a so-called ninja path is a path that guides them forward and makes them stronger. Once they violate their own ninja path, then there will be no room for further progress, and they will directly block their own path of becoming stronger. For internal force cultivators, what they seek is their own heart. Internal force cultivators practice is a kind of practice that constantly develops their body and spirit with the help of the forces of nature. Therefore, in such a process, when facing a substantial imbalance in the development of their physical and spiritual abilities, the so-called heart devil will appear, that is, the power that is difficult to control will disturb their mind. Therefore, in the process of internal force cultivators practice, what they need to adhere to is their own heart. Once they violate their own heart, they will directly be disturbed by the heart devil, and their strength will be damaged, and in the worst case, they will die. Nangongzhi didn't hide anything. Instead, he directly told what happened to him. Hearing that Nangongzhi fell into such a dangerous situation because of his own heart and the needs of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion couldn't help but feel ashamed in their hearts. After all, it was their incompetence that caused Nangongzhi to fall into such a dangerous situation. After hearing Nangongzhi's words, the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces also resonated with Nangongzhi's love for the Bloodcloth Pavilion and his restraint of his emotions. After all, as a ninja, almost every ninja has more or less experienced such a situation where their own heart and the interests of the ninja village conflict. Since they have similar experiences, they naturally have similar resonance. Chapter 772. When he noticed that many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces had resonated with his words at this moment, Nangongzhi also loosened his shackles on the Ninja Allied Forces a little, but he still maintained his sword domain. After all, one can't guard against the intention of harming others, and it's only right to take certain measures. After being a ninja for a long time, Nangongzhi knew better than anyone how cheap the so-called feelings of a ninja are and how they can be directly discarded at any time. But when I have been entangled in how to deal with my selfishness and fairness, I suddenly found that when I triggered such a war involving many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces, the so-called selfishness and fairness have already been intertwined. How can I talk about whether it's purely for the Bloodcloth Pavilion or for myself? After saying that, Nangongzhi couldn't help but look down at the sword in his hand. There seemed to be scarlet blood left in the cracks of the sword because of all the years of killing. His eyes were full of helplessness and contempt for himself. In fact, Nangongzhi had always thought that he was the one who had paid the most, but when he looked back at everything he had experienced, how could other people's lives be more comfortable than his? No matter who it was impossible for anyone to have a perfect life, because as long as one was still in life, it was inevitable to face the test that life brought to oneself. Perhaps such tests were different for everyone, but each of these tests undoubtedly brought about endless troubles for people. He didn't know when Nangongzhi had become the kind of self-pitying and pretentious human that he hated the most. It was precisely because he was disturbed by his inner demon that Nangongzhi obtained such an opportunity. Between life and death, between gains and losses, between survival and death, he was no longer in the situation, but had jumped out of the situation and started to observe everything about himself. After understanding my own mistakes, my own vision has also changed. Now, what I care about is no longer temporary gains and losses, but long-term gains and losses. Looking at the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces lying on the ground, They have lost their own body temperature. They didn't have to suffer such pain, and their people didn't have to accept the sadness of their deaths. But it is precisely because of the influence of personal selfishness and public interest that such a war was born. It is my fault. Nangong's eyes swept over the corpses on the ground, and the sadness in his eyes was so strong that it was almost overflowing. He directly carried the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand on his back. Obviously, he was ready to stop attacking. Nangongja loudly made his declaration to the ninjas of the Allied forces and the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. From now on, the Bloodcloth Pavilion, for the sake of eternal peace and no longer spread sorrow to the ninja world, I will apply to the Allied forces to stop the war and negotiate peace. I asked the person in charge of the Allied forces to give me an answer after the negotiation. Although when Nangongja began to restrict the attacks of the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, everyone knew that it was very likely that the Bloodcloth Pavilion would not continue to fight with the Allied forces. But when Nangongja really announced such a decision, the ninjas of the Allied forces couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. After all, the strength of the current battlefield was too obvious. If the battle between the two sides really continued, then there was a 30% chance that the Allied forces and the Bloodcloth Pavilion would both suffer, and a 70% chance that the Allied forces would be directly destroyed while the Bloodcloth Pavilion would suffer relatively serious damage. Now, although the Allied forces didn't care much about Nangong's inconsistency and reluctantly attributed the reason to his own understanding of the stream of consciousness. After all, now was enough to stop the war and give the Allied forces a chance to continue to survive. Whether Nangong's reason was sufficient or not was not worth the Allied forces to consider. It was better to let the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, as well as the five-element Altar Master and Nangongja have an in-depth discussion. Disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, now listen to my order to gather and retreat 5 miles to show the Allied forces our determination to negotiate. After making his declaration of truce, Nangongja didn't wait for the Allied forces to respond to his declaration. He directly ordered the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to leave the battlefield and set up camp. Although Nangong's words just now combined with the impression many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion had of Nangongja, and reluctantly made the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion accept Nangong's words. But as the higher-ups of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the 4 altar masters here wouldn't accept Nangong's words so easily. After all, the losses of the Bloodcloth Pavilion here were too great. If they directly retreat now, the losses of this battle would be too great. Moreover, this time, the Bloodcloak Pavilion and the 5 great shinobi villages have completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Although the 5 great shinobi villages don't have enough power to deal with the Bloodcloak Pavilion due to many limitations and strength, but as long as the Bloodcloak Pavilion still exists in the shinobi world, it will definitely become a stubborn bone in the throat of the 5 great shinobi villages. As long as they accumulate enough power in their hands, the shinobi Allied forces will definitely directly destroy the Bloodcloak Pavilion with a thunderous force. It can be said that even if they used up the last strength in their hands now, it would be much better than negotiating with the Allied forces. Currently, the Bloodcloth Pavilion had a clear advantage. Once the ninjas of the Allied forces were given too much time to recover their strength, then this battle would become even more difficult to fight. However, other than the unconscious old man Qing Mu, Bai Shui, Qi Yin, Ho Tu, and the other 5-element altar masters did not act up on the spot. Instead, they followed Nangong's instructions and led the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion to retreat and set up camp. In the final analysis, the reason why the 4 altar masters were so obedient was that after Nangongja finished the declaration of peace, he suddenly cast a glance at the 3 altar masters. There was deep wisdom in his gaze, so the altar masters didn't doubt at all. They were very convinced that Nangongja actually had his own arrangements. Chapter 773. Seeing that the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion actually retreated directly, abandoning the victory that they had won with so much blood and sacrifice, even the ninjas of the ninja allied forces couldn't believe it at this moment. They could only look at the remaining 6 Kage-level ninjas in the ninja allied forces and Uzumaki Naruto, who had just saved everyone. Although Naruto has made a lot of progress over the years, Naruto's growth was mostly focused on combat. Such a large-scale battle and the treachery between people were still a little strange to Naruto. So at this time, the ones who really had the right to speak were the Wood Leaf Sannin and the 3 Kage-level ninjas. No matter what these people from the Blood Garment Pavilion are planning, their retreat is not bad for us. At the very least, we have obtained a chance to regroup. Now that we have obtained such an opportunity, we must not be overly cautious and waste it. Instead of thinking about it and trying to figure out what the people from the Bloodcloth Pavilion are thinking, it is better to focus on recovering our strength and do our best to gather our strength in preparation to continue confronting the people from the Bloodcloth Pavilion. As long as we have enough strength in our hands, regardless of whether it is a life and death battle or a genuine peace negotiation, we will naturally have more leverage in our hands. Looking at the hesitant eyes of the people, as the only woman of the 3 Kage-level ninjas, Mei, the 4th generation Mizukage, spoke her thoughts to the others present. As a woman, Mei's mind was more delicate than a man's, but as a ninja village ninja, she was very decisive. The two different characteristics of delicacy and decisiveness were perfectly integrated in Mei's body at this moment, and her suggestion to everyone was naturally supported by most of them. After all, no one thought that they were smart enough to directly guess what a very smart person like Xianxia was planning. Since there was no way to predict Xianxia's actions with 100% probability, then it was better not to predict. Now, they focused on recovering their strength and began to draw a part of their strength from their respective ninja villages to concentrate their strength against the many powerful internal energy cultivators of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. After confirming that all the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion had evacuated to a safe position, Xianxia also left the field division of the ninja allied forces to catch up with the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Just now, Xianxia issued the order for the whole army to retreat 5 miles. But in fact, many ninjas of the Bloodcloth Pavilion stopped under Xianxia's order and were waiting for orders. At this moment, Old Man Aoki has recovered his consciousness, and Xianxia personally helped him to the main tent. In the main tent, Bisui, Akame, and Hoodoo have been waiting for a long time. When they saw Xianxia directly help Old Man Aoki to the main tent, they naturally knew what to do and directly found a chair for Old Man Aoki to sit on. After settling Old Man Aoki, Xianxia also directly sat on his own chair in the main tent. Looking at Bisui, Akame, Hoodoo, and Old Man Aoki, who were in front of him with a little bit of curiosity, Xianxia didn't put on any airs and directly told the 4 of them about the plan he had made before. Xianxia's series of plans of fighting against the allied forces of ninja, consuming their combat power, forming an alliance of small countries, occupying the land of wind, forming a country of wind, and forming a situation of dividing the world into 2 was directly told to the 4 altar lords without any reservation. After hearing Xianxia's series of plans, the 4 altar lords also began to predict in their hearts how high the success rate of such a plan would be. As a result, everyone discovered that such a method was the plan with the highest success rate. It was far better than directly defeating the allied forces of ninja. Directly has a better prospect. After all, the 5 great ninja villages have ruled the entire ninja world for many years, and such a kind of inertia has formed in the ninja world. Once the Bloodcloth Pavilion breaks such order, it will naturally lead the ambitious people in the entire ninja world to the brink of destruction. Once the ambition breaks out, it will be like a river bursting through a dam, waiting for all the ambitious people to either die or achieve success to usher in stability again. However, such a process is destined to be very long. If you don't believe it, you can look at the history of the entire ninja world. The general trend of the world has always been like this. After a long time, there will be division. After a long time, there will be unity. After a long time, there will be chaos. And after a long time, there will be peace. However, what the Bloodcloth Pavilion needs is not a chaotic world, but a relatively stable world for them to slowly develop their strength. If they want to develop themselves, simply building a car behind closed doors is not a good choice. On the contrary, the existence of a ninja with a certain degree of threat can really stimulate the sense of crisis in everyone's heart, so that no one can slack off in the slightest. After all, any slack will directly lead to the death of everyone. However, such a plan still has its own problems. First of all, such a plan must be limited to a very small area, or even only one person knows about it. Second, such a plan can only be carried out by Nangongzhi alone. After all, in the entire Bloodcloth Pavilion, only Nangongzhi has the prestige to make everyone willingly obey him. Just like in a battlefield just now, because Nangongzhi accidentally fell into a coma, such a plan was directly scrapped by half. Now, it has increased a lot of difficulty to make up for it. Supreme Sama, we are already clear about your plan. Although it is quite late now, I believe that since you will tell us your plan now, you must think that you have a certain plan in your heart. And directly giving up the victory of the battlefield, you must have your own plan. So no matter what kind of plan you have, we will directly obey your orders. We have 100% trust in you. Looking at Nangongzhi, Aoki, who is already very weak, directly said such a long sentence. At this moment, the other 5 elements, altar lords of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, looked at Nangongzhi with full of trust in their eyes. Such a feeling of being trusted made Nangongzhi's heart extremely warm at this moment. Chapter 774. Looking at the 5 elements, altar lords, standing in front of him, Nangongzhi was also very emotional. After all, in the ninja world, how many people can trust him so unconditionally like these 5 elements altar lords? Nangongzhi clapped his hands, and Uchiha Sasuke also directly walked out from behind a curtain in the big tent. Seeing Uchiha Sasuke walking out like this, although the eyes of the 5 elements altar lords were quite surprised, there was not much rejection. After all, although Uchiha Sasuke once had the identity of a ninja, Uchiha Sasuke was also the disciple of Bloodcloth Pavilion's chief, Nangongzhi. In the battle just now, Uchiha Sasuke personally killed many ninjas of the ninja allied forces and completely broke with the 5 major ninja villages. So at this moment, it was not difficult to understand that Uchiha Sasuke directly walked out. Although there was no way for my plan to be smoothly implemented before due to various reasons, I have been preparing for such a plan for a long time. The small countries themselves have also gathered enough strength. We must not give up such a force easily. Looking at the 5 elements, altar lords, and Uchiha Sasuke standing in front of him, Nangongzhi's eyes flashed with a trace of light, and then he said to them, "The plan I made before actually still has room for implementation." Now we suddenly want to negotiate with the ninja allied forces to get enough conditions for the implementation of our plan. I think now we can divide the personnel inside Bloodcloth Pavilion into 3 parts, 2 big and 1 small. A small part of them will still stay here and follow me to attract the attention of the ninja allied forces, so that they have no way to pay attention to other places. Akane and Bisui will lead a group of people and a group of people from the Small Country Alliance to attack the Land of Wind, while Hutsu, Sasuke, and Aoki will lead another group of people and a group of people from the Small Country Alliance to attack the Land of Earth, striving to take down these 2 countries in the shortest time. I believe that with the consistent performance of the ninja allied forces in large-scale wars, they will definitely take advantage of our sudden ceasefire to transfer more forces from their own countries to reinforce their own army. The strength of the Wind Country itself is relatively weak among the 5 major countries, and the Earth Country, because of the serious injury of the Sandaime Tsuchikage, has no leader. They can only listen to the arrangements of the other ninja villages, and like a fool, they draw a large number of forces from their territory. Once we conquer these 2 countries, We can organize our men to guard the borders and swallow these two huge pieces of land into our stomachs. Although the wind country is relatively barren, the earth country can be considered a fertile place by then. These two huge pieces of land are enough to support our development. I have already roughly planned out the attack route for your two groups. Now, I will explain it to you. If you have any opinions, you can speak up and we can discuss it together. With that said, Xianxia directly spread out a detailed map of the shinobi world in the main tent and explained some of his plans to the 4-5 elements Altar Lords and Uchiha Sasuke. In the main tent of the ninja allied forces, Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Uzumaki Naruto, representing with Leaf, Terumi, Mei representing Mist, A representing Cloud, Gaara representing Sunagakure, and Inoki's son Kitsuchi and granddaughter Karatsuchi representing Rock Village. A total of 8 people sat directly at a round table and discussed what kind of countermeasures the ninja allied forces should take to deal with the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Since the Blood Cloak Pavilion has proposed such a request, and the Blood Cloak Pavilion leader Xianxia's speech on the battlefield seems to be really emotional, is it really possible for us to negotiate? Facing the long silence of everyone, the relatively younger Karatsuchi from Iwagakure was the first to speak. Hearing Karatsuchi's childish speech, except for Naruto, who seemed to have some consideration, everyone didn't take it seriously. However, Karatsuchi's status was very special. She was the granddaughter of Inoki, the Tsuchikage. After all, the current ninja allied forces was composed of the 5 major ninja villages, and there was no specific leader. Therefore, for Karatsuchi, who represented Rock Village at this moment, no one knew how much they despised her childish thoughts. After all, this Xianxia of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is a ninja from Woodleaf Village. I don't know what Woodleaf Village knows about such an existence. Cloud Village's Raikage directly asked the 3 people from Woodleaf Village. After all, Xianxia's title of Ninjayama was made during the Battle of Woodleaf Village. Since he was a ninja from Woodleaf Village, I definitely didn't believe that Woodleaf Village didn't know enough about such a person. And maybe because he was a little impatient at the moment, although Raikage's words sounded polite, his tone was inevitably a bit aggressive. Listening to A's question, even Jiraiya, who was famous for his good temper, felt a bit uncomfortable at the moment, let alone Uzumaki Naruto, who was very impatient. Raikage-sama, I don't know what you mean by this. Almost trying his best to suppress his temper, Naruto pressed his hand on the table, and his whole body slightly leaned in the direction of Raikage, obviously very excited. Orochimaru glanced at the very excited Naruto and didn't want to dissuade Naruto. He just looked at A with his slightly gloomy eyes and said to Yondaime Raikage, although Xianxia used to be a ninja of Woodleaf Village, this person was very mature when he was a teenager. Although he didn't do things flawlessly, he left very few flaws. It's not realistic to say that our Woodleaf Village didn't investigate any information about Xianxia over the years, but this information involves the strong person beyond the Kage level, and it needs to be checked by the Hokage himself. Naturally, we have no way to access such information. Now, the most powerful medical ninja of our Woodleaf Village is rushing to the battlefield under our deployment, and at the same time, they will treat the injured ninjas in the many ninja coalition forces. Chapter 775. Orochimaru, a former rebellious ninja of Woodleaf, became the backbone of Woodleaf's forces in the meeting of the 5 major ninja villages, which was really interesting. With the hot temper of the 4th Raikage, when he saw Orochimaru sitting at the table, he was already a little unhappy, but after listening to Orochimaru's words, he unexpectedly didn't directly show his temper, but directly sat in his seat. Although his face was not good, he still didn't speak. In the end, it was because of one thing that Orochimaru just mentioned. Woodleaf was gathering its internal medical ninja to support the frontline troops. Although medical ninja itself has a long history, and it's not a type of ninja that Woodleaf monopolizes, it has to be said that during the 2nd Shinobi World War and the 3rd Shinobi World War, Woodleaf Village has formed a complete medical ninja training mechanism. The medical ninja of Woodleaf Ninja Village is unique in the shinobi world, whether it's in terms of personal quality or group number. Woodleaf can bring such a group of treasures directly to the battlefield at this moment is already a move beyond everyone's expectations. Or in other words, this is already a good behavior of Woodleaf. Himself has no special malice toward Woodleaf. The reason why he put pressure on Woodleaf Ninja Village is actually to make Woodleaf do more to support such a battle, and now it's obvious that Woodleaf has shown enough sincerity, so it naturally won't be so aggressive. The reason why A's face is not so good now is entirely because Orochimaru, a former rebellious ninja, seems to have been completely recruited by Woodleaf and began to do his best for Woodleaf. Such a genius who doesn't care about the means returned to Woodleaf. Naturally, it will greatly increase the strength of Woodleaf, which is not a good thing for other ninja villages. After seeing that Woodleaf Village has shown enough sincerity, the other two Kages of Cloud and Mist villages were not to be outdone, and naturally, they were not to be outdone, and they said that they will draw a part of their strength from their own ninja village to join the frontline battlefield. The number of reinforcements mentioned by Terumi Mei and AI was very amazing. It seemed like they were staking everything on this one bet. Looking at Woodleaf, Mist, and Cloud Village, Gaara as the Kazekage, Kuratsuchi, and Kitsuchi as the representatives of Awagakure also had a good eyesight at this moment. After all, the current behavior of Woodleaf, Mist, and Cloud Village is also a kind of behavior to show their muscles to a certain extent. If they retreat at this time, it is likely that after the war, they will be constantly exploited by everyone. Don't look at how everyone is cooperating with each other and fighting together. Once the common enemy of these comrades disappears, these comrades will directly turn from hounds to hungry wolves and pounce on their flesh and blood. The history of the past countless years is enough to prove that comrades with common interests are real comrades. Once the common interests are lost, the so-called comrades will become out-and-out thieves. After a long silence, Gaara, as the fifth Kazekage, also directly said his decision with a slightly dignified face. Sunagakure is willing to provide the entire Ninja Alliance army with 500 bottles of top-level poison, and will send 300 elite puppeteers and 200 Jonin-level ninjas to join the battlefield. The biggest advantage of Sunagakure itself, compared to other ninja villages, is its unique poison and unparalleled puppeteer skills. Cultivating an elite puppeteer is not much easier than cultivating a Jonin-level ninja. It can even be said that it is more difficult. Now, Gaara can directly say that he will send so many ninjas to support the front line. Obviously, the Sunagakure is also willing to pay a lot of money. Orochimaru, AI, and Mei glanced at Gaara with extremely obscure eyes, but their eyes weren't filled with admiration for Gaara's willingness to support the Ninja Coalition army, but they were quite surprised. They were surprised that Gaara could become the Kazekage of one of the 5 great ninja villages with such a personality. What would Leaf Village pay? Although Orochimaru claims to be the strongest medical ninja unit, medical ninjas are very rare. Even Woodleaf Ninja Village itself doesn't have many medical ninjas, and adding the word strongest is a subtraction of the already scarce number. Such a unit is only about 100 people, although the Mist and the Cloud expressed their attitude very early, and the numbers they said were very amazing. They were also accurately counting the number of ninjas to ensure that enough ninjas stay in their villages. They didn't go all out like Gaara. Gaara wasn't a fool. As a Jinchuriki, Gaara was very sensitive to other people's eyes, good thoughts, and evil thoughts. Orochimaru, Terumi Mei, and A's eyes were actually caught by Gaara, but Gaara had no choice but to make such a desperate move. Compared to other ninja villages, the geographical location of the Wind Country is very disadvantageous. Most of its territory is desert, and there's no way for civilians to survive. In some places, even ninjas will die if they are not careful. Although this time Shinobi World War is not an internal war between the 5 major ninja villages, the situation is far better than the previous ones. It can be said that such a war has almost wiped out the Wind Country's strength. According to Gaara's estimate, It will take at least 10 years to recover with the ability of his country. Sand Village can't afford to stay in place for 10 years. After all, the development of the ninja world is the survival of the fittest and the survival of the strong. While other ninja villages are improving, Sand Village is still licking its wounds. Such a situation is simply a slow death. That's why Gaara was so desperate and directly pulled almost all of Sunagakir's power into the battlefield, using these forces as bargaining chips in the final negotiation to win more benefits for the land of Wind and Sunagakir. Orochimaru, and Terumi Mei were also shocked. After all, most of the Kage are stable existences. Suddenly, Gaara staged such a big gamble, which really surprised everyone. Chapter 776. Gaara's method surprised Orochimaru, Mei, and but it also added a lot of pressure to Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who had been hesitating. Sandai Minoki of the Rock Village was still in a coma, so there was no one in the Rock Village who could make the decision at this moment. They could only push out Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who had good prestige and strength, to represent the entire Rock Village. Everyone present was very familiar with Inoki, because Inoki himself could be said to be an old man. His words and actions were almost watertight. When it came to his own interests, he was very difficult to deal with. But relatively speaking, Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi, who were sitting here now, didn't understand the roundabout gullies in the hearts of these high-ranking people. Instead, they directly understood the meaning of everyone's words. Looking at the 4 other villages except for the Rock Village, at this moment, the hearts of Kitsuchi and Kuratsuchi became heavier and heavier. Although they weren't so good at scheming against people, as relatives of Inoki, Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi naturally knew the current situation of the Rock Village. If they want to keep up with the number of support, the Rock Village will definitely face great danger. Such a difficult decision wasn't something that Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi could make. While Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi were still struggling in their hearts, the people of the other 4 villages also looked at Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi as if they were waiting for how much support the Rock Village would give to the front line. At this moment, everyone's eyes seemed to be directly pressing on Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi's hearts, making it more difficult for them to make their own decision. The 2 of you don't need to worry. After all, the 2 of you are not the official Tsuchikage of the Rock Village. The decision we make now is likely to be a decision that will affect the future of our village. Please don't be too anxious. As long as you think carefully and make a decision, we will be here patiently waiting for the 2 of you to make a decision. After seeing the hesitation of Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi, Terumi Mei, as the Mizukage, directly persuaded the father and daughter. When she spoke, she was extremely gentle, as if she wanted to use this method to calm the 2 of them down a little. That's right. Anyway, we have already decided what kind of price we should pay before coming here, and the order has already been issued to our own villages. Even if the Rock Village can send people here, it's just icing on the cake. It's naturally better to have them, but it's not a big deal if they don't come. Immediately after Terumi Mei's voice fell, Orochimaru's slightly gloomy voice directly passed into everyone's ears. After hearing his words, Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi's eyes turned red, but there was no way for them to refute. The words spoken by Terumi Mei and Orochimaru made people feel relieved and angry. The tension and relaxation were quite coordinated. At this moment, the shame and anger in the hearts of the father and daughter, Kuratsuchi and Kitsuchi, were stimulated to the extreme. After all, their experience was too shallow, and the tacit word between Orochimaru and Terumi Mei directly pushed Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi to a situation where they had to make their own decision. The more anxious a person was to prove himself, the more fatal the decision he would make. When Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi sat together with red eyes, even if you don't deliberately listen to what the 2 of them were talking about, it was enough to guess that their mood at the moment must be very unstable. Finally, under the heavy gaze of everyone, Kuratsuchi and Kuratsuchi made their own decision with difficulty. The Rock Village is willing to send 100 elite Earth-release ninjutsu squad and 300 jonin to support the battlefield. After saying such a sentence, Kuratsuchi and Kitsuchi directly left the main tent of the ninja allied forces with a bad look on their faces and went to the place where the ninjas of their villages gathered to pass on the orders they had just decided. Seeing the Rock Village's representative leaving without saying goodbye, the other shinobi villages also left one by one. Looking at the other shinobi villages leaving, Naruto said to Jiraiya, who was standing beside him, "That's right, lascivious sage, it's obvious that everyone is working hard for victory. But in the end, why are they not on the same page? People often say that a wise man is great wisdom looks stupid. Perhaps Naruto is not a person with great wisdom, but the tense atmosphere in the main tent was still captured by Naruto. At this time, it should be the time to work together to fight against the blood-robed pavilion. But why did everyone start a plot against each other? Such a situation made Naruto feel very sad and puzzled at the same time. Naruto, in fact, even a person like me who has been in the ninja world for many years can't give you a perfect answer to the question you asked. Because the human heart is like the flow of a vast river. It changes everywhere and changes according to one's heart. Any small change may directly change a person's mind. Listening to Naruto's question, Jiraiya, who was very close to Naruto, naturally couldn't remain silent, and Jiraiya also hoped that Naruto could make progress. So he began to tell his thoughts to Naruto. Let's not talk about the future. Let's talk about why the ninja allied forces are fighting against each other at this moment. In fact, in the final analysis, it's because the Blood-Robe Pavilion has shown a bit of fatigue. Although the Blood-Robe Pavilion itself has a very outstanding Nangang-ja as its leader, the Blood-Robe Pavilion itself has really shown itself in the ninja world for too short time. Although we were at a disadvantage in the battle with the Blood-Robe Pavilion, that's because the people of the 5 major ninja villages in the front line were already mentally tired and physically exhausted. When all our reinforcements arrived, how could the Blood-Robed Pavilion, who only had a little advantage in the battle just now, resist? Since victory is not so far away, then everyone in a high position should naturally think about how to share the benefits brought by the war instead of fighting wholeheartedly. Chapter 777. Listening to the almost absurd words from Jiraiya's mouth, Naruto's heart became more and more strange. Obviously, everything is not a foregone conclusion yet. Why is everyone already thinking about how to get more benefits for themselves instead of thinking about how to hold the victory of the war in their hands? Suddenly, such a sentence has suddenly appeared in Naruto's mind. Meat eaters are despicable. People in high positions often attach great importance to benefits. If they can't get enough benefits from a matter, many people in high positions can't put their mind into this matter at all. Just like now, when the people of the 5 major shinobi villages think that the threat of the Blood-Robe Pavilion is no longer great, and they can take down the Blood-Robe Pavilion directly after paying a certain price, everyone also began to use their own means to grab their share of the war dividend. Lascivious Sunin, they're starting to harm each other like this. Are they really not afraid of losing this war? Looking at Jiraiya, Naruto was puzzled, but he couldn't find the answer at all. Listening to Naruto's question for a while, Jiraiya also didn't know how to answer. When Jiraiya and Naruto fell into a dilemma at the same time, Orochimaru suddenly opened his mouth and said to them, "Don't worry. Sure enough, you are people of the same origin. Even on such an issue, you are also digging into a bull's horn." Hearing Orochimaru's words, Naruto's anger was immediately aroused. For this Sandaime Yuan Fei, who regarded him as his grandfather, Orochimaru, who killed him, and Uchiha and Sasuke from with Leaf, Naruto's impression of him can be said to be not so good. And now, Orochimaru directly ridiculed him and Jiraiya. Naruto, who was very easily provoked, naturally became very uneasy at this moment. And just when Naruto was about to attack, Jiraiya directly reached out and pulled Naruto. In the entire shinobi world, If there's someone who can understand what kind of person Orochimaru is, it's definitely Jiraiya. Previously, Orochimaru's actions were very extreme because of some defects in his soul, but now, Orochimaru's extreme thoughts have been erased from his soul after his resurrection. Now, the reason why Orochimaru directly provoked Naruto and Jiraiya was actually because of some bad taste in his heart. It was precisely because Jiraiya knew how bad and black-bellied Orochimaru's character was that he reached out to stop Naruto. He didn't want the friction between the two to become more intense. Jiraiya couldn't stop Orochimaru, but he could stop Naruto. Looking at Jiraiya, who was holding his hand tightly, Naruto forcibly suppressed all the anger in his heart, but his eyes were still staring at Orochimaru, wanting Orochimaru to give him a reasonable explanation. What you two see is the deception between the shinobi villages, and you think that such deception is not a good thing. But have you taken a good look at the result of such deception? Would Leaf sent elite medical ninjas, and several other shinobi villages also drew a large part of their power directly into the battlefield. There is no doubt that the strength of the shinobi allied forces has been greatly strengthened at this moment. Sometimes the process is not so important, because the result is what can really play a role and be passed down. So, even if everyone has their own calculations in their hearts, these things are not so important. As long as our expectations can be achieved, what's there to care about? As a result theorist, Orochimaru only needs a result in his own imagination. As for what others think in their hearts, Orochimaru doesn't care at all. Orochimaru's point of view can be said to be fundamentally different from Naruto's and Jiraiya's views. So after hearing Orochimaru's words, although they knew that what Orochimaru said was reasonable, Naruto and Jiraiya still didn't have any problem solved at this moment. Instead, they became more worried. Looking at Naruto and Jiraiya's appearance, Orochimaru also knew that his point of view didn't convince these two rather stubborn guys. However, Orochimaru had already been mentally prepared. He had been with Jiraiya for so long. Naturally, he knew that Jiraiya wouldn't accept his point of view at all. So after Orochimaru finished all his words, he directly turned and left the Shinobi Allied Forces headquarters tent. After Jiraiya and Naruto looked at each other, they shook their heads helplessly and directly left the headquarters tent. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp, there were originally thousands of people in the camp. At this moment, only about 200 people were left in the camp. The remaining disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion directly left the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp in small teams and went to the designated location to gather. Although most of the people have been taken away, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp still maintained the size of thousands of people to cover up the emptiness inside. Nangongja also wrapped his sword domain around the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp. He always paid attention to whether there were ninjas from the Ninja Allied Forces to investigate the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp. Once he found the Ninja Allied Forces ninjas, Nangongja would immediately deploy the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples to attack. When necessary, he would even personally attack those ninjas from the Ninja Allied Forces. Now what Nangongja needs to do is to try his best to deceive the many ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces. The more ninjas are delayed in this place, the more room Nangongja's designated plan will have to be carried out and the more likely it will succeed. Sitting in his seat, Nangongja looked at a piece of paper in his hand. After carefully reading it several times, Nangongja directly injected a part of his sword chi into the paper in his hand, directly crushing the paper into powder. With a gentle wave of his hand, the paper dissipated into the dust. Sure enough, after seeing that I took the initiative to admit defeat, the Ninja Allied Forces immediately couldn't help but want to take advantage of the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disadvantage and start preparing to directly defeat the Blood Cloak Pavilion. It's a pity. Narashikaku's status is still too low. The only ninja who is proficient in the art of war was directly ignored. The Ninja Allied Forces can only fight me blindly. Chapter 778. Just when the reinforcements mobilized by the Ninja Allied Forces had not yet arrived at the battlefield, suddenly, An invitation was sent from the blood-clothed pavilion's base to the ninja Allied Forces base. This letter was naturally written by Xianxia himself and sent someone to deliver it to the ninja Allied Forces. After receiving such an invitation, the ninja Allied Forces naturally wouldn't underestimate it. The representatives of the 5 great ninja villages once again gathered in the main tent at this moment, looking at such an invitation made of ordinary paper. Perhaps it's because they've been ninjas for too long. After seeing such an invitation from the enemy camp, they naturally wouldn't open such an invitation so casually. Almost all the people who were proficient in poison and mechanism jutsu were gathered here, and after studying this invitation for a long time, they still didn't find any problems. After waiting for a long time for the inspection, this was the only result they got. Everyone felt a little awkward in their hearts. Among them, the most hot-tempered one, walked directly to the invitation and grabbed it in his hand. Fourth Reikage-sama, please don't worry. Let's be careful and check it carefully again before opening such an invitation, okay? Seeing a holding such an invitation in his hand, Kitsuchi was very nervous, and he quickly came forward to persuade and not to be so reckless. However, there's a feud between the rock and the cloud. Over the years, no one knows how many people have lost their lives because of the conflict between the 2 villages. Even if Kitsuchi didn't say anything that would cause a misunderstanding, it still made A's heart very uncomfortable. A Wagakure is really a group of cowards. The first thing you think of is conspiracy. Since you're all so timid, let me see what's the mystery of such an invitation. If you guys are afraid, just find a corner and stay there. Although the Reikage's words were mainly aimed at a Wagakure, it also directly ridiculed the entire Allied forces and their villages. Even if everyone knew A's temper, they couldn't help but be a bit angry. However, AI didn't care if others were angry at him or not. If they were really angry, they could just come up and fight with him. What was the point of showing their anger with his eyes? He put his finger into the slit of the invitation card and opened it directly. The words that were written with a brush rushed directly into AI's eyes. War or peace? Do you have a decision? Just 8 words were enough to fill up the entire invitation card. After seeing these words, A's eyes suddenly became a bit dazed, as if a sharp sword was held in Xianxia's hand and stabbed towards him. In a panic, it directly threw the invitation in his hand away, and he also directly jumped back half a step, as if he was avoiding something. When the crowd saw that AI had retreated, they began to feel nervous. Everyone was also prepared for battle. Their eyes were vigilantly looking at the invitation card that AI had tossed aside. After subconsciously dodged, he also touched his goatee a bit awkwardly. After all, he was so arrogant and ridiculed everyone. And he even opened the invitation, but now he was directly scared by the invitation. It was really difficult for A to accept. But A's hand touched his chin, but he couldn't touch his goatee. AI Xianxia covered his chin with his entire hand. When he touched his chin, he found that the beard on his chin had been directly cut into a flat cut, as if it had been cut by a sharp blade. This, a slightly exclaimed, and everyone also looked at A's direction. Suddenly, they found that A's goatee was cut into a rather funny appearance, but they didn't have the slightest mood of ridicule in their hearts. Instead, their eyes became more cautious. A mere invitation can directly make the 4th Reikage, a Kage of a village, unable to dodge, and it took him a long time to react after being hit. Is this a joke? The strength of Xianxia of the Blood Cloak Pavilion has reached such a level? After seeing such a scene, the hearts of all the members of the Ninja Allied Forces sank. Everyone knows that Xianxia's sharp sword attack is a powerful existence, and the ability to cut off the 4th Reikage's goatee without him noticing was also done by the sword attack. The fact that the sword attack could produce such an effect is enough to prove how powerful Xianxia is at this moment. It even gave everyone the illusion that the previous battle was actually a joke between Xianxia and the Ninja Allied Forces, and then Xianxia used the sword domain to restrict everyone in the battlefield. This kind of feeling became more and more intense. For the unknown, As long as one is a person, they will instinctively feel fear. And what level of strength Nangongja has at this moment, and how much of a threat he can pose to the ninja allied forces at this moment, all of these have become unknown. How can the ninjas of the ninja allied forces not feel fear in their hearts? After a little fear appeared in everyone's heart, and then looking at the invitation that Nangongja handed to the ninja allied forces, everyone was quite at a loss at this moment. Should we fight or make peace? Fight. Can we really fight against such a strong person who doesn't know the depth of his strength? And if we make peace, then, as we expected, will we be able to see the Bloodcloak Pavilion kneel down and beg for mercy, and then directly plunder the Bloodcloak Pavilion savings? Originally, they thought that they would win, but now it seems that they are starting to think that the situation will develop in the direction of 50-50. The heads of the 5 major ninja villages in the ninja allied forces were inevitably anxious at this moment. Chapter 779. Looking at the invitation card that had fallen to the ground, the words written on it also rushed into everyone's eyes. Although the 4th Reikage AI had just opened the invitation and released the sword energy contained in it, there was still some sharp aura left in the big words, which made everyone present feel a bit of pain in their eyes. War or peace? Now the ninja allied forces really couldn't give a suitable answer. It seems that we have to urge our reinforcements to come to the battlefield as soon as possible. Although we don't know how strong the Bloodcloth Pavilion and Nangongja are, and whether they have the same strong reinforcements as us, it's obvious that the Bloodcloth Pavilion thinks that they have the ability to fight us head-on. If we don't succeed in delaying Nangongja and the Bloodcloth Pavilion, maybe we will really suffer heavy losses here. Terumi Mei looked at the invitation on the ground, and her eyes were quite dignified. When Nangongja was still working for Woodleaf, Terumi Mei had fought with Nangongja several times. As the opponent of Nangongja, she knew Nangongja very well at that time. Although this man was young at that time, his behavior was very steady and mature. He did things almost flawlessly, and there were no effective flaws that could be grasped in every action. Such a very steady person from an early age naturally wouldn't suddenly become radical and take risks. Looking at the current Nangongja deliberately showing this attitude, it was obvious that he didn't put the ninja allied forces in his eyes at this moment. Therefore, based on her understanding of Nangongja, Terumi Mei also said such words. Most of the people who have been in contact with Nangongja, after hearing Terumi Mei's words, all of them agreed with her. After all, it's easy to change mountains and rivers, but it's hard to change one's nature. A person's habits and rules of speaking and doing things can't be changed casually. At this moment, the heads of the 5 major ninja villages all used their own methods to issue orders to the reinforcements to speed up the march. After all the orders were passed, Orochimaru suddenly reached out and beckoned a ninja of Konoha and said to the ninja, "Don't worry, Orochimaru." Passed down the order, everyone starts to pay close attention to the movements of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Since Nangongja sent such an invitation to us, we'll definitely not end here. He will definitely find another opportunity to put pressure on us, so that we have to sign the so-called peace agreement with him because of some pressure reasons. Once you find anything, report it to us immediately. After hearing Orochimaru's words, the Woodleaf Ninja immediately bowed his head and walked out of the tent. After everyone heard Orochimaru's arrangement, they also felt that what Orochimaru said was very reasonable, and Orochimaru himself didn't seem to intend to hide the matter of his investigation. The order he gave to the Woodleaf Ninja was also reported to us after returning. Such behavior was quite enjoyable for everyone present. The cold-hearted and ruthless Lung Jun Orochimaru had now become so proficient in the ways of the world. For a moment, everyone was quite shocked. Orochimaru didn't care about other people's opinions at all. In fact, what Orochimaru wanted to do was to let Nangongja be free to play his plan and see how much change this person who was a ninja but wasn't a real ninja can bring to the ninja world. Since Nangongja wanted to force the ninja allied forces to negotiate with him, Orochimaru was of course happy to promote such a thing and see what kind of plan Nangonja had. After waiting for a few minutes, the Woodleaf Ninja who was sent by Orochimaru to investigate the movements of the Bloodcloth Pavilion returned to the main tent. He half-knelt on the ground and respectfully said to Orochimaru, "Reporting to Orochimaru-sama, the Bloodcloth Pavilion has indeed taken action now. In the middle of our ninja allied forces camp and the Bloodcloth Pavilion's camp, a long table has been placed at the moment. The leader of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, Nangonja, is also sitting on the side of the long table accompanied by a woman at the moment. He seems to be waiting for something. As a scout, this Woodleaf Ninja was very scrupulous in his duty. He didn't take any of the main points of view in his description. Instead, he was very objective and directly described everything he saw. However, everyone present also experienced a lot of hardships. Nangonja's behavior was actually very easy to guess. He was waiting for the reaction of the ninja allied forces at this moment. Should they close the door and not come out? Or should they directly come out to meet Nangonja? To a certain extent, closing the door and not coming out is indeed a good choice, because not making a choice means that they won't bear the risk after making a choice. However, Nangonja directly sent the invitation to the Ninja Allied Forces camp with great fanfare, and the slightly excessive reaction of the Ninja Allied Forces almost made such a thing known to everyone. Once they directly choose to close the door and not come out, it will undoubtedly be an extremely great blow to the morale of the Ninja Allied Forces. It is not yet possible to decide whether to fight or reconcile with the Bloodcloth Pavilion in the future. Once the morale is lost, no matter what choice they make, they will undoubtedly suffer a huge loss. After all, there are only two people standing up at the moment, and one of them is a woman. Even with such a lineup, the higher-ups of the Ninja Allied Forces didn't dare to go out. So, if they really face a difficult battle, won't the higher-ups of the Ninja Allied Forces also be unwilling to go all out because of their pride? On the contrary, many ordinary ninjas will become sacrifices. And once they really go out and have a face-to-face discussion with Nangonja, Nangonja will definitely take advantage of the fact that the Ninja Allied Forces' strength has not been replenished, and his Bloodcloth Pavilion side has a relatively advantageous position. So he will make all kinds of demands that the Ninja Allied Forces can't accept. At this moment, the people who were standing in the middle of the tent, who could make decisions, also didn't know what to do. We will face what we have to face after all. Blindly escaping now will only put us in a disadvantageous position. After all, what Nangonja wants now is to seize more benefits from our hands. In that case, we might as well see how big this person's appetite is. Anyway, we can kill time with him and wait for our reinforcements to arrive, so why not? It's just a change of place to stay. Although he was almost hit by the hidden sword energy in the invitation sent by Nangonja, the fourth Raikage still stood up and directly expressed his opinion. Whether it was in his eyes or in his heart, there was not the slightest fear, but rather a somewhat brave posture. Chapter 780. Nangonja, dressed in a white robe with blood-red patterns, sat quietly in front of the table. Beside Nangonja stood the substitute altar master of the golden altar of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, Mishiro. He was also wearing a white robe with blood-red patterns, but the patterns on his robe were more concise. Originally, Nangonja left Mishiro in the Lion Clan's alternate dimension, but Mishiro wasn't willing to stay in a safe place by himself. Instead, he let Nangonja wander between life and death. However, because of Nangonja's repeated persuasion, Mishiro, who was also one of the 5 Elements Altar Masters, was reluctantly allowed to stay in the Lion Clan's alternate dimension. Now that Nangonja had sent out the 4 5 Elements Altar Masters and Uchiha Sasuke, who represented the peak strength of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, to carry out missions, Nangonja couldn't appear alone every time he came into contact with the Ninja Alliance. Otherwise, everyone would suspect where the other higher-ups of the Bloodcloth Pavilion went. After considering various aspects, as well as Mishiro's worry about Nangonja using himself as bait to restrain the Ninja Alliance, Mishiro finally followed Nangonja to such an operation to deliberately put pressure on the Ninja Alliance and attract their attention. Standing next to Xianxia, Mashiro didn't feel the slightest bit nervous because of his low strength. To put it bluntly, even if Ro, Little Linger, and even the people in the Bloodcloth Pavilion who cultivated a little were actually much stronger than Mashiro in terms of cultivation, Mashiro's confidence didn't come from his cultivation, but from his wisdom. To be able to help Xianxia take care of the affairs of the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion and tightly control the 5 elements altar like the sharp metal altar, how could Junbai be an ordinary person? Mashiro took out a tea set and a small charcoal stove from a small box he carried with him and placed them next to Xianxia. He gently fanned the charcoal stove a few times, and the small charcoal in the stove that originally didn't seem to be hot turned red. He then placed a small copper pot filled with water directly on the stove and waited for the water to boil. After watching Mashiro display all of Zheng Yang's things, Xianxia looked at Mashiro with a bit of helplessness and said, "We're here to negotiate with the enemy. Why do we bring so many things? It looks just like a field trip." Although there was a bit of helplessness in his tone, Xianxia's eyes also had a bit of smile. Kai could see that Xianxia was very happy right now. Since he started to plan for the 4th Shinobi World War, Xianxia had almost no time to accompany his family. Although Mashiro appeared by his side for various reasons, Xianxia still liked the feeling of having his family by his side. Mashiro heard Xianxia's complaining voice, but he didn't immediately talk to Xianxia. Instead, he directly leaned his body and put his nose close to Xianxia's collar. Then he said to Xianxia, "First, you have to smell first. There's a smell of alcohol on your body. Did you secretly drink a lot of alcohol in the past few days when I wasn't by your side?" Hearing Mashiro suddenly ask such a question, Xianxia's face turned a little red. There was a time when Xianxia liked to drink very much. After all, the drunken immortal wine left by the Banishment Senior and the Bloodcloth Pavilion later imitated the drunken immortal wine and made a second-grade drunken immortal wine. Both of them trained Xianxia to be a veteran drinker. However, as Mashiro stayed longer and longer in the Bloodcloth Pavilion and read a lot of books about food and the human body, he directly forced Xianxia to quit drinking. Except for a few cases where Mashiro allowed Xianxia to drink a few glasses, he wanted to touch a glass of wine. Dream on. It seems like Qi Yin, that idiot, brought you wine again, and you couldn't help but drink a lot of it. Almost without thinking, Mashiro directly looked at Xianxia and said his conclusion. After all, this kind of situation had happened many times. Ever since Mashiro found out that Qi Yin secretly brought wine to Xianxia, he had already warned Qi Yin not to do so. Otherwise, he would not let Qi Yin off easily. However, Qi Yin did not know if it was because Xianxia was the only drinking buddy among the higher-ups of the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Even in the face of Mashiro's warning, Qi Yin still did things his own way. As long as he had the opportunity, he would definitely drag Xianxia to drink. If it was under normal circumstances, it would be fine. However, Xianxia was currently injured. Qi Yin was willing to drink with his injuries to make it difficult for his injuries to heal. However, Mashiro was unwilling to let Xianxia have any injuries left on his body. You ask me why I suddenly brought so many things here. Isn't it to let these tea leaves, specially cultivated by the Bloodcloth Pavilion, that can regulate internal qi to help you offset some of the injuries caused by the wine? I don't care if you like to drink or not. You have to drink properly. Although Mashiro's words were quite harsh, Xianxia knew very well that Mashiro was actually worried about his body. Although it was not appropriate to use the words deep love here, it could still slightly express Mashiro's feelings. Although Mashiro kept saying all kinds of things, his hands did not stop at all. It required extremely complicated steps to stimulate the internal qi of the tea leaves. Even the most proficient tea master in the Bloodcloth Pavilion would need to concentrate for at least a quarter of an hour before he could do it. However, Mashiro directly reduced the process to about 6 minutes while he was happily bickering with Xianxia. Moreover, part of the time was waiting for the water in the copper pot to be heated to a certain temperature. Looking at Mashiro's slender hand in front of him, Xianxia also smiled slightly and directly took the teacup from Mashiro's hand. He observed the color, smelled the fragrance, and tasted the taste. Although Nangongzhi did not care about the many details when drinking tea, he still attached great importance to Mishiro's cup of tea. He followed the 3 steps that were necessary in drinking tea. Chapter 781. After drinking a cup of tea, Nangongzhi instantly felt a warm current flowing through his body. It continuously cleared up the parts of his inner energy that were slightly stagnant. Gently sniffing the faint fragrance left on the teacup with his nose, Nangongzhi's high tension, due to his responsibility, also slightly relaxed. In front of his family, Nangongzhi never deliberately concealed his true feelings, so Mishiro also easily saw Nangongzhi's mood change from Nangongzhi's eyebrows. We found that Nangongzhi's mood began to become better. Mishiro also became slightly happy. The two chatted like this, talking about some interesting things that happened recently between their family, Nangongro and Little Linger. Mishiro also made tea for Nangongzhi while chatting. He also had a sense of leisure. Time passed quietly. Nangongzhi and Mishiro were drinking tea and chatting here, and almost an hour had passed unknowingly. However, the two seemed to have forgotten that they were staying here to put pressure on the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces, and were drinking tea and chatting to their heart's content. Or, just the two of them drinking tea and chatting happily actually put enough pressure on the Ninja Allied Forces? When the Ninja Allied Forces discovered that Nangongzhi and Mishiro appeared in the middle of the two armies, they were already very nervous, and Orochimaru was still constantly sending waves of ninjas to investigate the actions of Nangongzhi and Mishiro. These investigating ninjas directly transmitted the conversation between Nangongzhi and Mishiro to the main tent of the Ninja Allied Forces, so that every big boss of the Ninja Allied Forces could watch the chat between Nangongzhi and Mishiro. The more they listened to the conversation between Nangongzhi and Mishiro, the more the big bosses of the Ninja Allied Forces were at the moment. So, while we're racking our brains to think of a way to deal with you, you're sitting under the sun with your family, drinking tea, and chatting about these trivial matters? As a ninja, although they must remain calm when performing tasks, this doesn't mean that ninjas themselves don't have a temper. How can they completely abandon their emotions when they're born as a human? At this moment, in the main tent, some of the more grumpy people, led by the 4th Raikage AI, were on the verge of exploding at this moment, shouting that they wanted to go out and teach Nangongzhi a lesson for despising them. Orochimaru stood in the crowd and coldly looked at everyone's every move and facial expression. Almost everyone's face or small movements showed anger and disdain for Nangongzhi's behavior. The more he looked at such a group of people, the more Orochimaru's heart looked forward to Nangongzhi bringing change to the ninja world became more and more intense. Ninjas have almost surpassed the level of the general public in countless years of development, and directly put themselves in the position of transcending all mortals. In other words, although ninjas don't directly label themselves as the so-called god, almost all ninjas don't put anyone other than themselves in their heart. This is a kind of almost instinctive contempt and disdain for powerless people. Although Orochimaru is not a kind person, he also understands the truth that water can carry a boat, but it can also sink a boat. The reason why the ninja village can continue to develop is naturally because of the extremely huge financial flow of the ninja village. These funds naturally don't appear out of thin air, but they are accumulated from many missions from the country and civilians. In other words, it is these ordinary people that the ninjas don't think so highly of. They are the ones that really support the ninjas, who have no production of their own and only have combat ability. It can't be said that no ninjas can see this, but most ninjas have been lost in their own power, treating the general public as nothing. Orochimaru doesn't care whether the ninja world will collapse or not, but once the ninja world collapses, won't his desire to study in peace have no chance to be realized? In fact, Orochimaru doesn't care so much about whether the ninja world will be peaceful or not. The reason why he is secretly promoting the development of Nangongzhi's plan is actually because Orochimaru saw the drawbacks of the ninja world, and he doesn't want these drawbacks to affect his pursuit of the ninja world. Looking at the somewhat excited appearance of the ninja allied forces, Orochimaru slowly walked to the center of the crowd and said to everyone, "Nangong's behavior is undoubtedly provoking our ninja allied forces. He wants us to go out and sit face to face with him on the negotiation table." Originally, the initiative to face Nangongja or not was in our hands. But now it is obvious that Nangongja has reversed the situation. If we don't go, there will inevitably be a great loss of morale. Since he dares to scheme against us like this, how can we be afraid of him? Let's go out and see what Nangongja is selling in his gourd. After hearing Orochimaru's analysis, the members of the ninja allied forces suddenly felt a lot better, and they directly shouted that they wanted to find Nangongja and fight him. Jiraiya stood in the crowd and looked at Orochimaru, who was acting like a leader. Although he was very pleased that Orochimaru could use his wisdom to help the ninja allied forces, he also had some doubts in his heart. In his impression, Orochimaru has always been a person who dislikes trouble and doesn't like to talk so much. In the past years when he fought side by side with Orochimaru, Orochimaru also didn't talk unless it was necessary. But now, Orochimaru, who was talking so eloquently and guiding the emotions of many people, was not the Orochimaru Jiraiya was familiar with, or there was something about Orochimaru that Jiraiya didn't observe. But what Orochimaru said before was not bad for the ninja allied forces itself. Although Orochimaru is likely to have some of his own ideas, it is completely within the scope of Jiraiya's tolerance. Now that Yondaime Hokage Watergate has fallen into a coma, Woodleaf indeed needs a resourceful person as a leader, and Orochimaru is more suitable than himself and Tsunade. Chapter 782. Finally, the ninjas of the ninja allied forces were persuaded by Orochimaru's words, not only because of their natural pride as a ninja, but more importantly, such a proposal was proposed by Orochimaru, Woodleaf Renin, who has extremely high prestige and fierce reputation. With such a person taking the lead, even if this matter causes any bad consequences, they can still directly shift the corresponding losses and responsibilities to Orochimaru. As for the possible loss of reputation and interests, naturally, they can also push all the blame to Woodleaf and Orochimaru. After reaching a consensus, the ninja allied forces naturally didn't have the slightest delay. Orochimaru, Terumi Mei, Gaara, and Kitsuchi, these 5 people are enough to represent the 5 major ninja villages in the ninja allied forces. They also walked out of the ninja allied forces tent and walked in the direction of Nangongja. When these 5 people walked out of the ninja allied forces tent, Nangongja sensed the figures of these 5 people with his powerful spiritual force. With a light wave of his hand, the internal force in his body directly gushed out, connecting the natural energy in the air and injecting it into the ground under his feet. Under the dual support of the internal force and natural energy, 5 seats were directly formed. I thought that these guys in the ninja allied forces would argue with each other for a long time. I didn't expect this group of people to reach a resolution so quickly. It only took them an hour to directly finish the discussion. Looking at the 5 seats that he easily cast, Nangongja said directly to Mishiro with a bit of teasing and surprise in his eyes. Indeed, it is indeed surprising that an organization like the Ninja Allied Forces can reach a resolution so quickly. After all, it involves a lot of interests. It seems that someone directly stared the pressure and directly proposed such a resolution. Whether it is Gaara, Terumi Mei, or obviously they don't have such a vision and ability. Minato Watergate certainly hasn't recovered yet, and Inoki is seriously injured. This is also quite a bit of thought-provoking. Obviously, it is impossible for such a person to suddenly emerge from the Rock Village to lead everyone. After all, Inoki's protection of the Rock Village is a bit too much. It seems that such a person is definitely from the Wood Leaf Village and has extremely high prestige. Mishiro began to slowly analyze the whole story. Although she didn't directly give an accurate name, based on Nangong's understanding of the entire Konoha village, there are only a few people who can withstand all kinds of pressure with their own prestige, and there are only a few people who can be decisive and decisive. Just by thinking about it, he knew that such a person is probably one of the 3 Sannin of Konoha, Orochimaru Konoha. Things are getting more and more interesting. After figuring out who is the leader of the ninja allied forces at this moment, Nangong's heart was full of interest. Previously, because of his soul being messed up, Orochimaru also had some mental problems. His personality was extreme, but on the battlefield, it seems that for various reasons, Orochimaru seems to have repaired his mental problems and became calmer and more rational than before. However, it is precisely this kind of calm and rational Renin Orochimaru that is the most dangerous and can't be ignored. No matter what the reason is, Nangongja can't ignore the existence of Orochimaru. However, judging from the current situation, he doesn't know why Orochimaru is doing things that are relatively beneficial to the Bloodcloth Pavilion. However, Nangongja naturally wouldn't think that Orochimaru will lean towards the Bloodcloth Pavilion so easily. After all, from Nangongja's understanding of Orochimaru, Orochimaru has no so-called bias towards any force since his strength reached a certain level. Orochimaru's pursuit is not these things, but the so-called truth. As long as he can get close to what he pursues, any price is actually cheap in Orochimaru's view. Now, perhaps Orochimaru thinks that it is more beneficial to support the Bloodcloth Pavilion to complete his plan, so he helps the Bloodcloth Pavilion like this. But when the Bloodcloth Pavilion has no value to Orochimaru, maybe Orochimaru will directly lean towards the ninja allied forces and directly destroy the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Everything now is just a coincidence, not something he can rely on. The only thing he can really rely on is the strength that is tightly nested in his hands. Looking at the 5 people from the ninja allied forces coming towards him, he didn't pay attention to the surprise of several of them because of the number of clay seats he prepared. He directly stretched out his hand and let the people representing the ninja allied forces sit on the seats. He didn't say anything, just took the tea handed to him by Mashiro and slowly sipped it, completely ignoring the 5 people sitting opposite him. The 5 representatives of the ninja allied forces, except for Orochimaru, naturally had a huge pressure in their hearts from the moment they left the main tent of the ninja allied forces. After all, to be honest, if the current ninja allied forces really had no chance of winning against the Bloodcloth Pavilion, so at this moment, the ninja allied forces could be said to be carrying the life and death of the entire ninja allied forces on their shoulders. But now, sitting opposite to Nangongja with such a huge pressure, Nangongja, the person who occupies the initiative, didn't say a word and just drank tea, directly breaking the various preconceived plans in the hearts of the representatives of the ninja allied forces, directly adding a huge amount of pressure to the representatives of the ninja allied forces. Although this method wasn't very subtle, it had a huge operability when combined with the psychological changes of the spokesperson of the ninja allied forces. The several people sitting opposite Nangongja also showed some impatience, and among them, Kitsuchi, who was the least shrewd, showed the most obvious expression. Even Kitsuchi's forehead had a thin layer of sweat because of the pressure. Nangongja, I don't think you called us here to stare at us. If you have something to say, just say it. Finally, after seeing Kitsuchi's embarrassment, Terumi Mei of the ninja allied forces took the lead to speak to Nangongja. Chapter 783. Hearing Terumi Mei from the ninja allied forces speak first, Nangongja also slowly drank the remaining tea in the teacup in his hand, then raised his head to look at Terumi Mei. There was no emotion in his eyes as he said to Terumi Mei, I think your ninja allied forces should be very clear about what I want to do. In the invitation I gave you, I have clearly told you my purpose. It's very simple. I want to ask now, are you going to continue to fight with our Blood Robe Pavilion, or are you going to negotiate with our Blood Robe Pavilion? Listening to Nangongja's words, the 5 powerhouses representing the ninja allied forces also exchanged glances with each other, as if confirming something. Finally, everyone's eyes were focused on Orochimaru, who advocated everyone to meet Nangongja this time. After all, since Orochimaru asked everyone to gather, naturally, It should be Orochimaru who answered Nangong's question. When Orochimaru saw that everyone's eyes were focused on him, naturally, he didn't refuse. His brain was spinning quickly, thinking about the purpose of Nangong's current pressure on the ninja allied forces. The current ninja allied forces and the Blood Road Pavilion are actually in a state where it is not suitable to continue the battle. Once one side forces the battle, it will actually make both sides suffer and let the clowns in the ninja world benefit. However, Orochimaru is also not sure whether Nangongja is willing to negotiate or not, because it is obvious that if the two sides negotiate now, whether it is the ninja allied forces or the Blood Road Pavilion, they can't get enough benefits to make up for the consumption of each other in the war. So the current situation is that once the war starts, both sides will suffer losses, and once the peace talks start, both sides will have to bear the loss of benefits. Since neither war nor peace was the way to go, the only choice in front of everyone was to drag things out. One thought, 100 thoughts. When Orochimaru directly analyzed the situation of the ninja allied forces and the Blood Road Pavilion on both sides, and observed everything objectively, those little doubts have actually been solved. The reason why Nangongja is pressuring the ninja allied forces through various means is not that Nangongja really wants to negotiate, but it is precisely because Nangongja is not willing to negotiate or has his own plan. That's why he is so aggressive in forcing the ninja allied forces to take a stance. Nangongja also knows that it is impossible to make the allied forces willing to negotiate at this moment. Even if someone in the ninja allied forces is willing to negotiate, Nangongja can directly propose a condition that slightly crossed the bottom line of the ninja allied forces, making them feel uncomfortable, and at the same time, they will not immediately let's talk. Nangong Kuroto-sama, please take a look at the few of us here. In fact, except for the Kazekage, Reikage, and Mizukage, including me and Kitsuchi Jonin, we are temporarily replacing the leader of our ninja village. This battle is extremely important for our ninja allied forces as well as the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Whether it is the losses between us or the contradictions between us, it is not something that can be directly solved by a simple peace agreement. Our ninja allied forces and the Blood Road Pavilion can be said to be the existence that dominates the entire ninja world. Once the problems between us can't be solved perfectly, then the remaining small contradictions between us are likely to directly become bigger under the brewing of time. So we need time to let our two Kages with Leaf Village and Rock Village recover their consciousness, and then we will have the right to decide whether to fight or to negotiate. Listening to Orochimaru's words, Nangongja, who was sitting opposite him, as well as the other 4 representatives of the ninja allied forces, were also shocked. Are you sure you are not joking? What Orochimaru said before is somewhat reasonable. After all, even if Kitsuchi and Orochimaru have a high prestige in their own ninja villages, they can't compare with the 2 Kages, Inoki and Watergate. It is normal that they can't make such a decision that involves the future of the 2 ninja villages. But after that, everyone's head was about to explode. Wait for Inoki and Watergate to recover their consciousness before they can make a decision? Not to mention that Watergate himself fell into a coma because of excessive consumption during the battle with the Blood Road Pavilion. Now there is no way to make up for his physical and mental deficiencies in a short time. Inoki's body was directly cut in half because of the battle. It is fortunate that he is still alive. If there is any accident during the treatment process, Inoki, who is already the oldest ninja in the ninja world, will probably die. Once something happens to Inoki, does Nangongja have to wait for the Rock Village to choose the next Suchikage? Nangongja listened to Orochimaru's words, and his face was obviously very unhappy. Originally, as long as the ninja allied forces can give him a reasonable reason, Nangongja can directly extend the time of the peace talks to buy enough time for the people he sent to attack the Wind Village and the Earth Village. But now, Orochimaru's words were undoubtedly digging a big hole for Nangongja. In this situation, even if Nangongja wanted to fool Orochimaru, it was already impossible. Otherwise, a bigger flaw would be caught by Orochimaru. At that time, Orochimaru's mistake might directly ruin the whole plan. Orochimaru, are you kidding me? Nangongja directly reached out and grabbed the sword in his hand. Although the sword is not out of the scabbard, a sharp momentum has been directly emitted from Nangongja's body. Looking at Nangongja, the rest of the people who represented the ninja allied forces also panicked. Judging from the dangerous aura emitted from Nangongja, it is obvious that Nangongja's strength has almost recovered to a perfect level, and with the strength that Nangongja showed, no one in the ninja allied forces can stop him. At that time, Nangongja will directly attack the ninja allied forces with a large number of troops of the Bloodcloak Pavilion, and no one will have a good time. Seeing Nangongja's reaction, Orochimaru, as the initiator of all of this, had a flash of wisdom in his eyes. Sure enough, Nangongja is also trying his best to delay. Chapter 784. At this moment, Nangongja's body exuded a sharp aura, but Orochimaru could find that although there was anger and aggression in Nangongja's aura, there was not much killing intent at all. As the representatives of the ninja allied forces, the other four existences couldn't help but ignore Nangongja's reaction at this moment because of the panic in their hearts. However, Orochimaru himself didn't care so much about what the ninja allied forces would experience, because it can be said that Orochimaru has never regarded himself as a member of any force in the ninja world. Seat Head Nangong's words are incorrect. Negotiations have always been about asking for sky-high prices while sitting on the ground. Since Seat Head Nangong does not agree to my conditions, then you can directly negotiate with us. Anyway, whether it is our ninja allied forces or your Blood Robe Pavilion, we both have the intention to reconcile, so why can't we put down the trivial pride in each other's hearts and cooperate to achieve our respective demands? After Orochimaru finished speaking, the other four representatives of the ninja allied forces immediately nodded to express their support. Orochimaru's rather radical speech just now had made all four of them very nervous. After seeing Orochimaru take the initiative to admit defeat, they naturally immediately echoed Orochimaru's words, as if they hoped that Nangongja could carefully consider their side. Nangongja's eyebrows swept directly across the five representatives of the ninja allied forces. When Nangongja's eyes touched them, their hearts inevitably trembled, as if they were afraid that Nangongja would suddenly pull out his sword and slash towards them. However, when Nangongja's eyes swept across everyone, he slowly released his grip on the Heavenly Calamity sword's hilt. Holding the sword's scabbard in his hand, he fiercely put the sword on the table in front of him, and the sound of bang directly shook the hearts of the five representatives of the ninja allied forces. I'll give you a chance, 3 days. I hope that by that time, you won't argue with me like this. After 3 days, if you can't give me a perfect answer, then I will definitely take many disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion directly to the big tent of your ninja allied forces and wait for you to personally give me an answer. With that, Nangongja grabbed the catastrophe sword that he had slapped on the table. He turned around and left with the catastrophe sword in his hand, heading towards the Blood Garment Pavilion's camp. When Mishiro saw that Nangongja was leaving, she also used her charming phoenix eyes to glare at the ninja allied forces and chased after Nangongja. Seeing Nangongja and Mishiro's silhouettes getting further and further away, the five people from the Ninja Alliance didn't even have time to say anything before the mud chair they were sitting on, which was formed by Nangongja's internal force and natural energy, directly collapsed. The place they were sitting on had suddenly turned into ashes. Naturally, everyone was shocked. As for Huang too, he jumped up in fright when the originally sturdy chair beneath him collapsed. His hand instinctively supported himself on the table in front of him, hoping to find support for his legs that had gone limp due to Nangongja's sudden outburst. However, the moment his hand came into contact with the table, the originally hard wooden table and the snow-white tablecloth also turned into sawdust and cotton wadding that filled the air. Huang Tue couldn't dodge in time, and his body was directly covered by cotton wadding and sawdust. He looked very miserable. Huang Tue's originally simple and honest face was directly covered by a kind of embarrassed and angry red. His slightly heavy complexion combined with his red face formed an extremely funny feeling. This Nangong's angry attack just now actually caused such a great power, and it didn't affect the ground under the table at all. Such exquisite control is simply unbelievable. Did this Nangong really recover his full strength? Although Huang Tue was very ashamed at this moment, he was still immersed in the powerful strength displayed by Nangong Zhe just now. If Nangong Zhe really fully recovered, then before the reinforcements of the Ninja Alliance arrive, won't everyone die in the hands of this Nangong of the Blood-Robed Pavilion and his many disciples? You worry too much. Seeing Huang Tue's nervous appearance at this moment, Orochimaru directly waved his hand, indicating that Huang Tue shouldn't be too nervous. Everyone has been in the ninja world for many years, and naturally, we have seen countless big and small things. The reason why I directly provoked Nangong Zhe just now was to observe Nangong Zhe's reaction. Although Nangong Zhe seems to have fully shown his strength just now, there is still no way to hide the fact that after receiving such a provocation, although Nangong Zhe pretended to say fierce words, he didn't do anything and directly left. What does such a situation prove? Do you still need me to explain it to you? Nangong Zhe's current strength is actually deliberately shown to us by himself. In fact, he also hasn't fully recovered. The reason why he is so anxious to have a peace talk with us is actually to give us enough pressure to prevent us from acting rashly. Not only do we need time, but Nangong Zhe also needs time. What is the best way to deceive others? That is, what he said is the truth, but he concealed a key part of it to a certain extent, and then used this part of the concealment to achieve his purpose of deception. Stalling for time is true, and deliberately showing his strength is also true. But is Nangong Zhe's real purpose of stalling for time really to recover his strength? Orochimaru doesn't know, and the ninja allied forces also doesn't know. But the explanation given by Orochimaru is enough to make the ninja allied forces feel convinced. And this is enough. After hearing Orochimaru's words, Huang Tue instinctively looked in the direction of A and Terumi Mei, who were more experienced in this matter. And Terumi Mei themselves had no clue. After thinking back and forth about what Orochimaru said several times, they also thought that there was no obvious mistake in what Orochimaru said. So after a little hesitation, they nodded to Huang Tue, obviously supporting what Orochimaru said. Chapter 785. After catching up with Nangong Zhe, Mashiro confirmed that he and Nangong Zhe were completely out of the Ninja Coalition surveillance. Then he immediately said to Nangong Zhe, "What's the matter with this Orochimaru?" Looking at him just now, he already knew that we were stalling for time. But why was he so ambiguous, messing with our thoughts and fooling the ninja allied forces? Is he on the side of the Ninja Coalition or on our side? As if he had been holding it in for a long time, Mashiro directly spat out all the doubts in his heart to Nangong Zhe like a machine gun. Facing Mashiro's doubts, Nangong Zhe seemed to understand at this moment, and directly turned to Mashiro and said, "Actually, you are right. What Orochimaru wants to do is to maintain this ambiguous state. Now, not only us, but even the Ninja Coalition also has a lot of complaints about Orochimaru. After all, in the process of the peace talks just now, Orochimaru clearly refuted my face. This kind of thing is naturally no problem in normal times, but the situation is that the Bloodcloth Pavilion is strong and the Ninja Coalition is weak. Once I start to lose my calm because of Orochimaru's deliberate provocation, then the Ninja Coalition will suffer more losses in the end. But now, whether it is us or the Ninja Coalition, we won't directly fall out with Orochimaru. For the Ninja Coalition, Orochimaru's identity is too special. Wood Leaf Village, which has lost the important combat power of the fourth Hokage, has almost become the place where the Sannin has rich qualifications and strength, and Orochimaru is quite proficient in tactics and has a reputation among the Sannin. As for us, we are now not sure to what extent Orochimaru has guessed the plan we are carrying out, and whether there is anything we can't deal with, so we don't dare to act rashly. Maybe this is what Orochimaru wants, whether it is the ninja allied forces or the Blood Cloak Pavilion. There is no way to do anything to him, and he is constantly moving between our forces to see some of his plans. At this moment, Xianxia was hugging the Heaven's Calamity, sword in his arms. His face seemed to be covered by a layer of frost, and he was extremely cold. He kept telling Mishiro his guesses. There were still a lot of things that couldn't be proven with direct evidence, but Xianxia and Mishiro weren't the police, so they didn't need such sufficient evidence. Xianxia and Mishiro only needed a direction to defend themselves, and Xianxia's explanation was obviously quite possible. Orochimaru is indeed a famous madman in the shinobi world. He can even play such a dangerous trick in such a situation. Others were afraid of getting burned, but Orochimaru was directly in the middle of the two fire pits, and he was having a lot of fun. Is this guy really not afraid that he will directly suffer the consequences of his own actions because of such a reckless and dangerous move, and end up dead? Mishiro's mind echoed a lot of information he learned about Orochimaru, and the more he thought about it, the more he felt how crazy Orochimaru was. Most dangerous people are dangerous to others, but crazy people are often crazy about themselves. When a person completely disregards life and death and losses in order to achieve their own goals, who can stop such an existence? Death of body and Tao. For Orochimaru, his own life was never important. The only thing he cared about was his pursuit of truth. Previously, Orochimaru became quite delirious because of the defects in his soul, but now, Orochimaru directly repaired his incomplete soul after resurrection for unknown reasons. The current Orochimaru is no longer as crazy and persistent as before, but instead, he added a layer of rationality to his madness and persistence. It is this rationality that restrains Orochimaru's madness and persistence, making him more dangerous than when he was crazy. Now, everything Orochimaru does is no longer controlled by his own emotions, but by his own almost cold rationality. He starts to plan step by step, observing all the changes in his eyes, putting all the factors that may affect the overall situation in his heart. Everything Orochimaru does now is to achieve his own pursuit. No exception. When Xianxia's last few words fell on the ground, Mishiro's back was directly covered by a cold feeling. A completely rational person, and all his actions are to achieve his own goals. Just thinking about it, Mishiro can't help but become afraid. It seems that we also have to speed up our plan. Although today's operation did not fully achieve our expectations, it is enough to cause enough shock to the ninja allied forces. What we need to do now is to use our advantage to get more benefits. Now, the ninja allied forces will definitely speed up their reinforcements again and again. Once the reinforcements arrive, they will definitely attack us directly without mercy. Now, we are stalling for time here, but the action team we sent out is really racing against time. Only by taking more rapid action can we perfectly achieve our goal in the shortest time. Standing beside Xianxia, when he heard how terrible an enemy like Orochimaru is, Mishiro's thoughts also drifted to the two action teams sent by Xianxia to the land of wind and the land of earth. After all, for the Blood Robe Pavilion now, the most important thing is not himself, but the two action teams sent out by Xianxia. Hearing Mishiro's suggestion, Xianxia also nodded, apparently agreeing with Mishiro's statement. The current situation was already very critical. What they needed was to take care of everything and consider all aspects of the matter clearly. Otherwise, if there is any mistake, it will directly lead to the loss of the whole game. Okay, after returning to the main tent, immediately give orders to the two action teams. Make sure they capture the land of wind and the land of earth as soon as possible, so that they can complete their plan as soon as possible. Only when the Blood Robe Pavilion stabilizes in the ninja world can we really achieve our goal. Chapter 786. Time quietly slipped away from the ninja allied forces and the Blood Cloak Pavilion's waiting. The ninja allied forces were still constantly urging their reinforcements, and even to the point where they didn't care about the consumption. And the Blood Cloak Pavilion also began to do their best to take advantage of the fact that the ninja allied forces had transferred a large number of living forces from their own territory, constantly attacking cities and seizing territories. Although the Blood Cloak Pavilion has only been on the campaign for a few days, with their almost crushing power, they directly flattened the land of wind and the land of earth. No city could last for too long in front of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Without the unified leadership of the daimyo, without the protection of powerful ninjas, there is no way to effectively protect their homeland by relying on the relatively scattered civilian encirclement forces in various cities and weak bureaucratic groups. After all, in the entire ninja world, the military and political division is very clear. The political division is all controlled by the bureaucratic group headed by the daimyo, and the military is all controlled by the ninja group headed by the kage. Almost all the military officers have undergone a certain period of training in the ninja village of their own country. But the only way to deal with ninjas is to use ninjas. Other methods are just small things. Some civilians can also use the means to deal with ninjas. The people of a ninja village naturally won't easily teach these military officers who rely on the political groups to exist. Otherwise, if one day those ambitious military officers use such means to kill ninjas because of fear, wouldn't it be a terrible loss? Therefore, for various reasons, in fact, a large number of city guards stationed in the cities of the ninja world have actually become an existence that can only deal with civilians and maintain the order of ordinary people. However, even if they continue to flatten all the way, the size of the land of wind and the land of earth and the limited number of people of the ninja allied forces still pose an extremely great obstacle. Many disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion are actually in a state of exhaustion at this moment, but in order to complete the task assigned by the Blood Cloak Pavilion, they can only continue to move forward. At the beginning of the attack, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has already determined the battle policy. That is, after attacking a city, directly imprison the people who have the ability to resist and directly impose martial law on the entire city. Except for the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, no one is allowed to enter or leave the city, even the soldiers of the small country alliance. Naturally, this was not done without a purpose. The Blood Garment Pavilion wanted to use this method to seal off the news that the Wind Country and Earth Country had been invaded. It can be said that so far, the whole melee plan has been very smooth. Those ninjas left behind in the hinterland of various countries haven't received the slightest news of their country being attacked. However, no one was a fool. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world. Under the continuous attacks of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, the land controlled by the ninja village was getting closer and closer. And in the cities built on these lands, ninjas gradually appeared, causing some resistance to the continued advancement of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. However, such resistance was not something worth paying attention to. After all, compared to unorganized ninja squads or even single ninjas, the Blood Cloak Pavilion was now engaged in a large-scale army battle. No matter how strange an individual's ability is, when facing the simultaneous attack of hundreds of thousands of people at the same time, it is impossible to have much room to play. After the Blood Cloak Pavilion once again captured a city of the Wind Country like before, after detaining the people with combat strength in the city, the Blood Cloak Pavilion withdrew from the city and continued to advance to the next city. At this moment, 2 prison guards from the Small Country Alliance were sitting outside the prison and chatting. The 2 prison guards were sitting at a square table at this moment. An oil lamp was lit on the square table, bringing some light to the slightly dim prison. In front of the 2 prison guards were a wine cup, and on the small square table there were also a few dishes. The 2 prison guards seemed to be drinking to their heart's content at this moment, and their voices became slightly louder. It must be said that this group of internal strength cultivators of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is really powerful. They can directly capture such a high city without any effort. Even if it was the people of the 5 great ninja villages, they would have to spend more effort, right? A slightly younger prison guard looked at his colleague sitting opposite him and said with some emotion in his heart, "The other jailer, who looked slightly older, looked at his colleague who was talking about the blood-clothing pavilion in an unrespectful tone. He put his finger on his lips and made a sh sound to his colleague. He seemed to be a little nervous as he looked around and said to his colleague, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Are you looking for death? How could you say something like that? Don't you know that our country's current reputation is actually supported by the Blood Garment Pavilion? We obey the Blood Garment Pavilion's every word. Even if we don't consider the name of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, we can't afford to offend any of them. Take a look at the previous battlefield. This group of capable people seemed to be born for battle. They directly charged through the rain of bullets and arrows. In the end, there were almost no casualties. Now it seems that whether it is the Wind Country or the Earth Country, they're slowly being controlled by the Blood Cloak Pavilion. When the time comes, the status of our small countries, which were originally bullied by the 5 great countries, will naturally rise. After all, the manpower of the Blood Cloak Pavilion is limited. At that time, based on the merits of our respective countries, we will definitely be rewarded. Now, what we should do is to do our job well and wait for the good days in the future. Hearing the elder's reprimand, the young jailer covered his mouth in fear. He obviously realized that what he said just now was a little too frivolous. After being reprimanded by the elder, the young jailer hurriedly smiled apologetically at the elder and said, I'm sorry, but I'm sorry, but I'm sorry. Brother, don't be angry. You and I have been partners for many years. I only spoke so casually in front of you. How would I dare to speak like this in front of others? Let's drink, let's drink. These things are not things that small people like us can worry about. This cup is not only to apologize for my previous careless words, but also to wish the lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion all the way to success. I'll drink. Seeing that the young warden seemed to be on the right track, the old warden didn't argue with the young warden anymore. He raised his wine cup and took a sip, suppressing his somewhat chaotic state of mind. Chapter 787. Just as the 2 guards were drinking and eating, in the corner of the prison, an old man who looked very old and had a crooked body suddenly flashed a glimmer of light in his eyes under the shadow of his headscarf. Most of the prisoners in this prison were people with martial arts. It was quite strange that an old man could mix in with such a group of powerful people. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion attacked this city, they actually encountered a relatively tenacious resistance. However, after all, the comprehensive quality of the city guards was here. No matter how tenacious the resistance was, it was almost impossible to turn the tide when encountering the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, who were far stronger than ordinary people. After the city completely fell, the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion naturally learned the reason why the resistance here was relatively fierce from the captives of the city guards. When the Blood Cloak Pavilion attacked, it was this old man who stepped forward and showed his extraordinary combat experience, commanding the city guards to constantly resist the invasion of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. After receiving such news, the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion naturally did not relax in the slightest. They immediately organized people to directly find this old man. After all, such a person who was proficient in war and had a lot of experience in fighting the enemy was too dangerous. Even if such a person was an old man who was about to die, they could not let him go. When this old man was faced with the encirclement of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, he seemed to accept his fate and was directly arrested by the people of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and temporarily detained in such a prison. This old man was none other than one of the 2 elders of the Sunagakure, Ebizo High. He was also the younger brother of Chio, who once resurrected Gaara, and the second grandfather of Sasori of the Red Sand. After Chio used forbidden jutsu to save Gaara's life, Ebizo High was quite disheartened and was unwilling to intervene in anything in the Sunagakure. Overnight, the place where Chio and Ebizo lived was directly destroyed, and Ebizo was nowhere to be found. No matter how hard the Sand Village searched, they couldn't find any trace of Ebizo. Ebizo, who had disappeared, was actually hiding in such a city located in the Land of Wind. He built a simple house outside the city and lived there, waiting for the day when he ran out of oil and went to find his sister. Even after the outbreak of the Fourth Shinobi World War, the disheartened Ebizo didn't return to the Sunagakure. When the Blood Garment Pavilion began to attack the city, Old Haizong was the first person in the city to notice the Blood Garment Pavilion's actions. Although Ebizo is not so willing to get involved in the disputes of the shinobi world, this city is actually an important economic center of the Land of Wind. After all, a large area of the Wind Country was covered by the desert. The place where such a tall city could be built was naturally a large oasis, supporting a large number of people and gathering a huge amount of wealth. After all, the Land of Wind is a place that he and his sister have been guarding for their whole life. The war against the outside world can be successful, but the Land of Wind must not collapse directly because of various reasons. It is precisely because of this that Ebizo directly stepped forward to lead the city guards in the city to resist the attack of the Blood Garment Pavilion. However, in the face of the strong offensive of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Ebizo himself was already disheartened and was ready to die. Naturally, he didn't prepare enough poison to resist the entire ninja allied forces. The city's defensive line resisted for a moment before the ninja allied forces tore a hole, and a large number of ninja allied forces directly attacked the city. However, according to Old Hai's observation, the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples did not directly clash with the civilians after invading the city. Instead, they attacked the city guards from both sides. They even sent a portion of their members into the city to control the civilian areas. Although their actions were rather violent, it seemed that the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples were very restrained. They did not start to burn, kill, and loot directly. Old Hai's eyes widened as he looked at the Blood Garment Pavilion disciples. It was precisely because of the extreme restraint of the Blood Garment Pavilion that Ebizo was more aware of the Blood Garment Pavilion's plan. War has always been because of two reasons: plunder or conquest. When the people who started the war occupied a city, they didn't think about how to accumulate wealth, but when they pacified the people, then their purpose naturally became clear. However, how large-scale the war was, and what was the purpose of the Blood Garment Pavilion? Just relying on such a battle wasn't enough to obtain enough information. Therefore, Ebizo hid his strength and was directly captured by the people of the Blood Garment Pavilion without any resistance. A person like him who suddenly appeared and helped the city guards to resist the attack of the Blood Garment Pavilion. As long as the Blood Garment Pavilion was ambitious in their heart, they would certainly interrogate him, recruit him, or kill him. They would certainly see the leader of the Blood Garment Pavilion attack and pry into some secrets. However, what was beyond Ebizo's expectation was that the people of the Blood Garment Pavilion didn't pay attention to an existence like him at all. They directly detained him and some people who had a certain strength in the city. After that, they directly left a large number of soldiers who seemed to be from a small country to detain them and directly withdrew from the city to prepare to attack the next city. Although it's not very similar to what I expected, but I also understand what the Blood Garment Pavilion is selling in the gourd. I didn't expect that the Blood Cloak Pavilion, which suddenly appeared at the beginning, would have such a plot. Swallowing the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth, which is directly swallowing half of the shinobi world into their stomach. What a big appetite! Ebizo sat in the corner. Although his complexion didn't change much, one of his hands directly stretched into his sleeve. A colorless and odorless fine powder silently drifted out from Old Haizang's sleeves. The prison wasn't spacious to begin with, and with the addition of a lot of people squeezed inside, it seemed to be even more compact. After this fine powder drifted out from Ebizo's sleeve, it directly rushed into the nostrils of everyone in the prison. At first, these people didn't have any special reaction, but as time passed, everyone's eyes became slightly red, and their breathing became extremely rapid. Chapter 788. Although the breathing of the person in the cell was getting more and more rapid, and his own breathing was also becoming extremely violent, The two jailers who had been sitting outside the cell and drinking until they were in a daze also noticed that something was wrong in the cell at this moment. However, when a person was drunk, their mind would be somewhat numb. The two jailers just pulled out the long sabers hanging from their waists and slammed them on the iron bars of the prison, hoping to let the prisoners know that they were the ones holding the sabers in their hands. As long as they wanted to, the prisoners' lives were in their hands. Both of them had been prison guards for many years, but now it didn't have the effect that they had hoped for. Not only were the prisoners not frightened by the two jailers at this moment, but they also seemed to be aware of the danger of the two jailers. They directly stared at the two jailers with fierce eyes, which made the two jailers feel a chill in their hearts. "You're just a group of prisoners. How dare you look at me like that? It seems that I really have to teach you a lesson. I'll let you know that the long saber in my hand is not just for decoration." The young jailer was the first to be unable to withstand the pressure. Before the older jailer could stop him, he directly stabbed his long saber into the prison. But such a casual stab directly pierced into the body of one of the prisoners. Feeling that he had stabbed something, the young jailer immediately withdrew his long saber. What a joke! The jailers were not executioners. They were only responsible for guarding the prisoners. Although they also had some interrogation skills, they couldn't really kill. When the young jailer withdrew his long saber, hot blood directly spilled on his shoes. Even through a layer of cloth, the young jailer could feel how hot the blood was on his shoes. "What the hell are you doing? We're just jailers. How can we casually attack the prisoners? If there are any casualties, how can we explain it to the higher-ups?" When a matter involved his job, the older jailer directly reprimanded the young jailer. However, the young jailer, who was usually reprimanded directly after being reprimanded by the older jailer, or directly apologized to the older jailer. At this moment, the young jailer's eyes were particularly empty, as if he was frightened by his own behavior. Seeing that the young jailer was scared silly, the older jailer didn't bother to reprimand this young man. He directly turned his head to check whether the prisoners in the prison were dead or not. If someone was really dead, then he must find a way to dispose of the corpse, otherwise it would really lead to a disaster. But when the older jailer cast his eyes on the prisoners in the prison, he was also shocked by the prisoners in the prison. These prisoners seemed to be stimulated by the blood that splashed out when a young jailer stabbed one of the prisoners. Their eyes directly turned scarlet, and the whites of their eyes were completely replaced by scarlet blood. Each of them was emitting an extremely dangerous aura. All of you better behave yourselves. Right now, we are all in prison, and there is a huge army guarding outside. What kind of trouble can all of you cause? All of you better stay here, and maybe you'll have a chance to survive. Otherwise, the army outside will directly crush us. How can you stop them with your weak kung fu? The elderly warden used almost all of his strength to shout at the prisoners. However, how could these prisoners who had lost their minds and only had the desire to destroy and fight understand his words? Instead, they opened their mouths and roared at the elderly warden in an incomprehensible manner. Old Hai was the elder of Sunagakure, so naturally, he was also extremely proficient in poison. However, these people were not poisoned. Instead, it was a type of tonic or stimulant. But as long as an ordinary person inhaled a highly diluted mouthful of this tonic, they would be able to recover their spirit. At this moment, Old Hai directly increased the dosage of this tonic to more than 5 times the daily dosage. This dosage directly caused the prisoners to completely lose their self-consciousness and their brain nerves to lose their sense of pain, which doubled their combat effectiveness. Seeing that these prisoners were almost enraged, Old Hai's hands that were hidden in his sleeves were all stretched out at this moment. Chakra condensed at the fingertips of Old Hai, and these chakra threads wrapped around the hard iron bars under Old Hai's control. The highly condensed chakra threads had become extremely tough and sharp at this moment. Almost with a flick of his hand, these sturdy iron bars directly turned into iron rods scattered on the ground, making clanking sounds. After the cage was broken, the prisoners who had been injected with excessive amounts of stimulants rushed out of the cage and pounced on the stunned senior warden and the dazed young warden. Once a person loses his mind, he will be controlled by his instincts, and there is no difference between a man and a beast. Old Hai was very clear that there was a large army stationed outside this prison, and because of his age, his strength had declined to the point where it was difficult to directly leave under the encirclement of so many people. Therefore, Old Hai directly used drugs on the prisoners who stood up to resist the Blood Cloak Pavilion, causing them to fall into a state of madness. However, the blood sacrifice of these people was bound to be valuable. Old Hai had decided to directly go to the frontline station of the Allied forces after leaving here, and let the ninjas of the Wind Country and the Earth Country immediately return to their own country to protect their own country's territory, so that the Blood Cloak Pavilion's plan could not be carried out. One by one, the civilian warriors who had lost their mind and sacrificed themselves for the Wind Country were sacrificed by Old Hai's plan. They were directly thrown out to attract the troops of the small countries left in the city by the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Old Hai directly used ninjutsu to merge into the sand, using the actions of these people to cover his tracks. When the troops of the small countries saw that these people dared to directly break out of the prison, they also directly launched an attack on these people who had lost their mind. After a series of attacks, they finally eliminated all these people, but Old Hai's whereabouts were unknown at this moment. Chapter 789. Sitting on his chair, Xianxia didn't read the battle reports from the Wind and Earth Country like usual. Instead, he sat quietly in front of the table without saying a word. His eyes just stared at the curtain of his tent, as if waiting for some news. After a while, Mashiro walked into Xianxia's tent with a few thin pieces of paper. Seeing Xianxia staring directly at the entrance of the tent, Mashiro gently waved the few pieces of paper in his hand a few times, then said to Xianxia, "The surveillance information from the ninja allied forces came." Hearing Mashiro's words, Xianxia nodded, then said to Mashiro, "I won't read it. Just tell me directly." Knowing that Xianxia doesn't like to read such a slightly complicated written report, Mashiro directly put the paper in his hand on the table, then directly said to Xianxia, "I have already read this information on the way here, then I will repeat it to you." This time, when our people were monitoring the Ninja Allied forces, they didn't encounter any resistance. The Ninja Allied forces seemed to be deliberately letting our people know what's going on in their camp. They didn't hold back and directly let our people go deep into their camp. Early this morning, the higher-ups of the Ninja Allied forces had already appeared directly behind their tents, as if they were waiting for something. They also prepared a large number of gifts and piled them directly behind their tents. Shortly after that, the reinforcements from the 5 major countries gathered directly behind them and entered the Ninja Allied forces' tents in batches. And after these people entered the camp of the Ninja Allied forces, it was obvious that the ninjas of the Allied forces were already preparing for war. It's almost certain that they will attack us as soon as they are ready. The long-awaited reinforcements of the Ninja Allied forces have all arrived here at this moment, which is not good news for the Blood Road Pavilion. After all, the Blood Road Pavilion hasn't completely completed the annexation plan of the Wind and Earth Country. However, Xianxia didn't look worried at all. Instead, he handed a report from the Border Guard Force on his table to Mashiro's direction. During this time, you have been paying attention to the situation of the Ninja Allied forces, and I've been paying attention to the information of our 2 special operations teams invading the land of Wind and the land of Earth. But 2 days ago, I received a border notification that I was very concerned about. This is a letter of apology from the border of the country of Wind. The content of the letter is very simple. 2 days ago, the border troops formed by the Disciples of the Blood Clothing Pavilion and the Alliance of Small Countries were attacked by a person. Moreover, this person directly broke through. Because of their mistake, these guards sent a letter of apology to me, asking for punishment. But I didn't directly punish them. Instead, I directly sent them a letter of condolence. And the reason why I did this is that in the letter of apology they sent me, they described in detail the characteristics and appearance of the person who broke through the border. Xianxia had always been a person who would reward those who did well and punish those who did wrong. But this time, on the surface, it seemed that the border guards of the Wind Country had failed in their duties, but Nangongzhi actually sent them a letter of condolence. Perhaps in the eyes of others, Nangongzhi's approach was to stabilize the people's hearts, but Mashiro knew that Nangongzhi must have his own reasons for doing so. After opening the letter of apology from Nangongzhi, Mashiro directly skipped the boring words of admitting guilt and asking for punishment, and directly flipped the letter to the appendix at the end. In the appendix, there was a portrait drawn by the blood-robed pavilion disciples according to the observation at that time, and after seeing such a portrait, Mashiro was suddenly slightly stunned. He had a slightly stooped body, a white headscarf, long white eyebrows, and a large robe. Even though he was dressed like this and looked like an ordinary old man, Mashiro felt a sense of déjà vu from him. As if to confirm something, Mashiro then looked at the battle records of such a person beside the portrait. Using a variety of poisons with unknown effects, extremely rich combat experience, very good at finding the weakness of others and attacking it, this person could be. Suddenly, the name of a person who had disappeared without a trace appeared in Mashiro's mind. After hearing Mashiro's uncertain voice, Nangongzhi also nodded to Mashiro, apparently telling Mashiro that his guess was correct. "I'll give the order now. Those guards who let this fellow escape will be punished in the harshest way possible. A person with such an identity directly rushed out of our line of defense. Wouldn't there be a huge loophole in our plan? If such a person directly entered the camp of the ninja allied forces, then our plan will be exposed instantly. Now that our crusade against the Wind and Earth Country is not over yet, we must not let the ninja allied forces directly return to support us." Seeing Mashiro's anxious look, Nangongzhi directly stood up from his seat, walked to Mashiro's side, and said to Mashiro, "Mashiro, don't panic. Listen to me first." When Nangongzhi put his hand on Mashiro's shoulder and spoke to Mashiro with a voice that didn't have a trace of panic. Instead, it was as if victory was in his grasp. Mashiro, who was a bit confused because of the sudden impact of the information, calmed down a bit at this moment and turned to look at Nangongzhi, who was standing beside him. When I first saw this information, I was also worried about how big of an impact the appearance of a person like Ebizo would have on us. But when I calmed down and looked at this information again, I found that although this situation seems to be dangerous, there's almost no disadvantage for us. Even if a person like Ebizo suddenly appeared in the Ninja Allied forces, it is a great advantage for our plan. Therefore, I didn't give any punishment to the border guards, but instead rewarded them. Chapter 790. When we see how much harm such a situation may bring to us, we ignore an important factor, and that is time. Seeing that Mashiro has calmed down, Nangongzhi also began to slowly explain to Mashiro why he didn't punish the border mixed forces for their negligence, but instead issued a rather comforting circular letter. The reality that we are facing now is that our troops have yet to completely occupy the Wind and Earth Country's territories. Therefore, we need to buy some time for them to complete their predetermined objectives. So under the inertia of thinking, we will think that such a task of delaying the world will inevitably fall on us. Only by ensuring that our plan is in the dark can we make the Ninja Allied forces pay attention to us and buy enough time for the other two teams to invade the Wind and Earth Country. But when we jump out of the inertia of thinking, can we assign such a task of delaying the world to others? After all, Mashiro is not a stupid person. When Nangongzhi's words have already reached such a situation, he naturally quickly understood what Nangongzhi meant by assigning the task of delaying the world to others. You mean, in fact, we can let the Ninja Allied forces drag us down? Hearing that Mashiro finally understood his meaning, Nangongzhi also nodded directly, then continued to say to Mashiro, "Yes, that's right. There are many people in the Ninja Allied forces who are injured. Although they have been recuperating for a while, they have not fully recovered. And these ninjas who rush to the battlefield under the repeated urging of the Ninja Allied forces will naturally not be so energetic. And in such a situation, Once a person with a very high status like Ebizo comes to the Ninja Allied Forces camp and says to all the Ninja Allied Forces, "You are all a group of fools. These people from the Bloodcloth Pavilion have already taken advantage of this time to steal our home. Why don't you hurry back to rescue them?" What kind of reaction will the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces have? Listening to Nangong's words, Mashiro also began to put himself in the position of an ordinary ninja in the Ninja Allied Forces to think. The more he thought about it, the more the anger in his heart became stronger and stronger. Although ninjas have always claimed that they can get rid of their emotions from their mind, how many people can do this? Once such an accident happens to the Ninja Allied Forces, what kind of reaction will so many ninjas have? Moreover, the country of Wind and country of Earth were being attacked. Would the other three countries spare no effort to help these two countries that were once estranged from them? Even if the high-level ninjas can see and agree to such an action, will the ordinary ninjas at the grassroots be able to put down such hatred and continue to fight for other countries? As the saying goes, die a friend is better than the poor. Now, the countries that are about to be destroyed are the land of Wind and the land of Earth. What does it have to do with the other countries? Don't tell me that if the lips are gone, the teeth will be cold. Once the Blood Garment Pavilion really swallows the country of Wind and the country of Earth, how long will it take to digest these two countries that are vast in size but have very ordinary resources and then pose a threat to the other three countries? Not to say hundreds of years, but a few decades is certain, and a few decades is enough for the other three countries to prepare for it. After all, the establishment of the 5 major ninja villages is only a few decades. If there's a few more decades, the ninja villages in the other 3 countries will naturally develop to an extremely powerful level. Even if the people in the Ninja Allied Forces reach a consensus and are willing to rescue the land of Wind and the land of Earth together, how fast can the ninjas who have already consumed a lot of energy reach the land of Wind and the land of Earth? Should they rescue the land of Earth or the land of Wind first? These are all questions that are directly placed in front of the Ninja Allied Forces. When a person is faced with a decision that involves their own fundamental interests, everyone only cares about what they can get. As for what others do, what does it have to do with them? The more Mashiro thought about it, the more he found that the arrival of Ebizo was actually not a bad thing for the Bloodcloth Pavilion. On the contrary, it may be more beneficial for the Bloodcloth Pavilion. Even if this is the case, we still have to guard against the Ninja Allied Forces who will directly kill us, the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion, who are staying here. After all, I am the altar lord of the pristine gold altar of the Blood Garment Pavilion, and you are the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, Gongong. Once the two of us die here, it will definitely cause chaos within the Blood Garment Pavilion. It seems that you and I need to carefully discuss when we should leave with the disciples here. After all, Mashiro was Mashiro. Although his heart was full of joy, he was completely unaffected by this joy in his heart, and soon found what kind of loopholes in such a plan. Yes, we do need to carefully discuss this point. If we can't grasp the time, although I am confident that I can take you away from here, but there is no way for the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion to get enough time to move. I have a little idea here. We need to continue to discuss it. After saying that, Nangongja pulled Mashiro to sit on a chair in the tent and began to talk about some of his plans. In the Ninja Allied Forces at this moment, everyone was full of a kind of elation. After all, during this period of time, Nangongja directly pulled the Ninja Allied Forces for so-called negotiations and put pressure on the Ninja Allied Forces again and again, and everyone was very keenly aware that Nangongja's strength had become more and more powerful. This kind of pressure falling on the Ninja Allied Forces was a bit too heavy, as if there was a sword of Damocles floating above their heads, and, at any time, it would directly fall from the sky and behead them. Now that their own side's reinforcements had finally arrived, everyone naturally became uncontrollably excited. Chapter 791. While the Ninja Allied Forces were constantly preparing for the war, in the Sunagakure camp, a person was respectfully welcomed into a tent located in the center of the Sunagakure camp. which was only slightly smaller than the ninja allied forces' main tent. Gaara was sitting in his seat at the moment, his eyebrows tightly knitted together, looking very dignified. This time, Gaara really wanted to get enough benefits in the battle with the Blood Cloak Pavilion, so he directly took out the Sunagaker's capital. Although Gaara didn't regret his decision, such a situation still made Gaara very nervous. He was afraid that because of his own problems, Sunagaker would fall out of the top 5 shinobi villages ranking. He didn't know how long it would take for Sunagaker to be submerged in the torrent of history. His eyes swept across the topographic map of this battlefield again and again. Gaara's mind constantly recalled the attack plan that had been set before, trying to find loopholes in it to reduce the danger that the Sunagaker ninjas might face. But just as Gaara recalled the battle plan in his mind over and over again, and from time to time his hand stroked the map in front of him, and even used his sand control ability to directly evolve into a sand table to constantly carry out tactical deduction, a voice sounded outside his tent. Reporting to the Kazaku-sama, a distinguished guest has come to visit. When he was concentrating on the Sunagaker's plan, he was suddenly disturbed. In fact, Gaara's heart was a little angry. Although without the influence of Shikoku, Gaara's violent character had been restrained a lot. After all, a leopard can't change its spots. Most of the time, Gaara couldn't completely control his temper. But such anger only lasted for a moment. Gaara quickly recognized his master from such a voice. It was the voice of Maki, the Kazekage's chief assistant. Even Maki, who could be said to be the most powerful person in the Sunagaker, would respectfully call him a distinguished guest. Gaara naturally wouldn't be so angry. After a little adjustment to restore his calm, Gaara waved his hands and directly dispersed the sand table in front of him. "Please come in." Gaara's voice spread out, and the curtains of his tent were lifted up. At this moment, Maki personally opened the curtain and welcomed the person behind him into Gaara's tent. The moment he saw the person who came, the suppressed anger in Gaara's heart disappeared without a trace, because the person who walked into his tent was none other than Chiyo's younger brother, the Sunagaker's old man Hai Laozo, who saved Gaara at the cost of her own life. "Hai Laozo-sama, it's been a long time. I thought you were no longer willing to come into contact with the trivial matters of the world and directly lived in seclusion." After all, he owed Chiyo's life, and Hai Laozo's status in the Sunagaker was too high. Facing such a person who worked hard and had a lot of involvement with him, Gaara naturally put down his arrogance as the Kazekage. He stood up from his seat and walked in front of Hai Laozo. "This old man wants to live in seclusion and not care about the world, but the Wind Country has reached a moment of life and death. How can I, an old man who has guarded the Wind Country for a lifetime, continue to live in seclusion?" At this moment, Hai Laozon's expression was not very good. After seeing the Blood Garment Pavilion's attack on the Country of Wind and calculating the speed of the Blood Garment Pavilion's attack, Hai Laozong could already conclude that the majority of the Country of Wind had already fallen into the hands of the Blood Garment Pavilion. Fortunately, the Blood Cloak Pavilion didn't kill them, so Hai Laozo vaguely felt that he could still save the cities of the Wind Country by returning to help. After all, most of the power of the Wind Country was still relatively intact in such a battlefield. The political leader of the Wind Country, daimyo of the Wind Country, and the military leader of the Wind Country, Sunagaker Kazekage, were also very safe at this moment. As long as they could return to the Wind Country again, there was still a possibility of restoring the Wind Country again. However, Hai Laozo knew that the Wind Country had been invaded, but Gaara didn't know. Gaara listened to Hai Laozo's tone that was not particularly respectful, and his respect for Hai Laozo was greatly reduced. "I am the Kazekage of the Sunagaker village of the Wind Country. Now you, a person who has retreated to the second line and didn't even appear in the battle, dared to directly scold me for dragging the Wind Country to the brink of destruction. Isn't this a slap in the face in public?" And now Baki was here, whether it was to maintain his dignity as the Kazekage or to vent his anger at Hai Laozo's undisguised scolding. Gaara said to Hai Laozo in a very unfriendly tone, "I don't know what I did wrong to make you, an elder of the Wind Country, directly scold me like this." Hearing Gaara's unfriendly tone, Old Hai glanced coldly at Gaara and said, "Let's go. Let's go. Do you know what happened after you directly transferred a large number of ninjas from the Wind Country?" As soon as Hai Laozo's words came out, Gaara's heart sank. After all, he transferred most of the power of the entire Sunagakure village, which may indeed damage the interests of the entire Wind Country. Without the threat of ninjas, it is very likely that there will be many rebellions in the Land of Wind, and it is naturally impossible to play a big role by relying only on those weak and flowery city guards. Seeing Gaara's sudden silence, Hai Laozo completely ignored the change in Gaara's expression at this moment. Instead, he directly glanced at Baki standing beside him. With just a glance, Baki directly left the tent, and a large number of Sunagakure ninjas directly surrounded the tent, where Gaara and Hai Laozo were located to prevent anyone from eavesdropping on the conversation between Gaara and Hai Laozo. Seeing Baki leave so tactfully, Hai Laozo also said to Gaara, who was very silent in front of him, "The Bloodcloak Pavilion has led a coalition of many small countries to attack the Wind Country and the Earth Country. Although I don't know what the current situation of the Earth Country is, most of our land has fallen into the control of the Bloodcloak Pavilion." Chapter 792. Hearing Ebizo's words, Gaara's mind suddenly went blank. The Land of Wind was invaded by the Bloodrobe Pavilion, and the Land of Earth was also invaded by the Bloodrobe Pavilion? When such a news rushed into Gaara's ears, it was like a bolt from the blue for him, and his whole mind went blank. Obviously, the entire Bloodrobe Pavilion has been delayed here, so why does the Bloodrobe Pavilion still have the strength to attack the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth? Is it possible that the Bloodrobe Pavilion camp that is now blocked by the Ninja Allied forces is just an empty shell, and all the powerful people of the Bloodrobe Pavilion have been sent to attack the Land of Wind and the Land of Earth? Suddenly, such a thought directly broke into Gaara's mind. Such a thought also answered all the questions in Gaara's mind. Why has Nangongja been putting pressure on the Ninja Allied forces to delay the invasion of the Land of Earth? Why is it that every time Nangongja appears with Mishiro instead of the other Bloodrobe Pavilion lords? Why did Nangongja not directly launch a general attack on the Ninja Allied forces, even though he has accumulated so much strength? Instead, he waited for the reinforcements of the Ninja Allied forces to arrive here. He didn't attack the reinforcements, nor did he destroy the transportation, but just let the reinforcements of the Ninja Allied forces arrive. Even at such a time when the war is about to begin, there is still no atmosphere of preparation in the Bloodrobe Pavilion camp. Ebizo, Sama, please come with me to the main tent of the Ninja Allied forces. This news not only needs to be known to us, but also needs to be known to the other ninja villages. At this moment, Gaara didn't have time to worry about Ebizo's tired body after a long journey. He directly took Ebizo's hand and led him to the main tent. Gaara lifted the curtain and saw Marky, who had been loyally guarding outside his tent. He directly ordered Marky, "Let's go." Baki now sent a few people to inform the leaders of the other 4 ninja villages and asked them to immediately go to the main tent for a discussion. But these people must keep their actions secret and don't make too much of a commotion. Now that this matter is related to the survival of our village and even the Wind Country, we must be cautious and hurry up. Do you understand what I mean? Gaara's eyes were fixed on Marky, and his eyes were full of solemnity and anxiety. Although Gaara would occasionally show a bit of irritation, Marky hadn't seen such a nervous and anxious look from Gaara for a long time. "Yes, I'll go now." Hearing Baki's response, Gaara directly left the Sunagakure's garrison and rushed toward the main camp in the center of the Ninja Coalition army. The people of the other 4 villages were all gathered outside the main camp at this moment. After meeting each other, they were quite confused. After all, Gaara's secret and anxious method of notification didn't explain anything clearly, and he directly asked the leaders of the 5 villages to come directly to the main camp. Even a fool can fully see the seriousness of the situation, But looking at the other people who seemed to be as confused as him, they immediately understood that such information should be only known by the Sunagakure, and it was very important information that may affect everyone. After confirming each other's gazes, everyone opened the tent's curtains and entered the main tent. At the moment when the curtain was opened, everyone was attracted by the scene in the tent. In the center of the main camp, Gaara has directly created a huge sand table with his sand control ability. The huge space of the main camp is almost completely occupied by the sand table at this moment. This sand table is not only the sand table of this battlefield, but the sand table of the entire ninja world. At this moment, Gaara and a stooped old man with white eyebrows stood on the sand table, representing the Wind Country, and looked at the group of people who walked into the tent. Everyone, I have a piece of information here that is not so good to tell you. First of all, I want to declare to you that such information was personally brought back by our Sunagekyu's Old Man High, and it is completely trustworthy. After saying this sentence, Gaara didn't care about the reactions of the people of the other villages. He directly told the representatives of the other 4 villages the information he had just heard from Old Man High, and constantly deduced the attack range of the Bloodcloak Pavilion on the sand table. Seeing that the Bloodcloak Pavilion had almost flattened the Wind Country and the Earth Country, Kitsuchi, the representative of the Earth Country, was also filled with panic at this moment. He said to Gaara, "Kazakage-sama, is what you said true? The Bloodcloak Pavilion actually sent such a powerful force to attack our country directly under our eyes, and now they're almost done with the attack." Gaara seemed to have expected that some people would not believe it, so he nodded to Old Man High, who was standing behind him. Old Man High also directly understood Gaara's meaning. He took off his slightly loose robe directly, revealing his back to the other representatives of the Ninja Coalition Army. We have already had a confrontation with the Bloodcloak Pavilion, and I think you all know what kind of performance these internal force cultivators of the Bloodcloak Pavilion have in the battle. Everyone should take a look here. I think you should understand, right? On Old Hai Zhang's back, there was a huge cut made by a sharp weapon. Moreover, this cut did not seem to have any intention of recovering. It was still scarlet red. From the looks of it, Old Hai Zhang had also used some methods to stop the bleeding. Otherwise, Old Hai Zhang would have already died from excessive blood loss. The disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion are good at using internal force to attach to their weapons, and most of them use swords. Once the internal force causes injuries on a human body, it will directly attach to the wound. As long as the internal force is not obliterated, the wound will never recover. The injury on Old Man Hai's body was caused when he broke through the border guard of the Bloodcloak Pavilion in the Wind Country. Presumably, this is enough to prove that the Bloodcloak Pavilion has already reached the Wind Country, right? Chapter 793. Gaara's heavy news directly hit everyone's head, but except for Kitsuchi, the spokesperson of the Earth Country, who seemed to have lost his soul because of Gaara's news, the other 3 ninja villages didn't have any particularly obvious reaction. As mentioned before, the ones who died were the Wind Country and the Earth Country. Such a situation has a lot to do with the other countries and several ninja villages. They only care about their own interests. How much benefit can rescuing the Wind Country and the Earth Country bring them? Originally, Gaara was actually looking forward to being a member of the Ninja Coalition. At this moment, the other ninja villages that stayed out of this matter could directly express their feelings for their allies here. But unfortunately, there was only endless indifference in front of Gaara. I don't know what you plan to do after hearing such news. Looking at Orochimaru, Mei, and is standing in front of him, Gaara asked directly, obviously hoping that they could give him a direct answer here. The geographical location of the water country itself was very special. The isolated water country was actually quite self-sufficient. Therefore, Turmi Mei, who represented the interests of the water country, felt Gaara's gaze at this moment. She averted her gaze because she was afraid of meeting Gaara's gaze. She had to show Gaara the attitude of the water country and the Mist Village. Compared to the water country, the Fire Country and the Lightning Country bordered the Wind Country and the Earth Country that were being attacked by the blood-clothed pavilion at this moment. Although the two countries can take advantage of the situation of the Wind Country and the Earth Country being invaded to directly ask for more from the two countries, it's naturally better to swallow the fat meat in their own mouth than to put it in the hands of others. No one can resist the temptation of expanding their territory, because such an act is a political victory, a military victory, and a victory that is enough to be remembered in history. As the Rakage of the Cloud Village in the Land of Lightning, unlike his rough appearance, the fourth Rakage AI is a person with great ambition. The country of Earth and the country of Lightning had a long-standing grudge against each other. AI's father had even died in the country of Earth's trap. Being able to kill such an enemy was simply an irresistible temptation for AI. Although Orochimaru didn't really want to join the Wood Leaf Village, at this moment, Orochimaru had to represent the interests of the Wood Leaf Village and began to think about the pros and cons. As long as the interests of the Wood Leaf Village are not damaged, it doesn't hurt. As long as the interests of the Wood Leaf Village are not damaged, it's enough. Moreover, after the Windstorm Watergate awakens, if he also makes up his mind to annex the Wind Country, it's not a bad thing for Orochimaru. After all, whether the Fire Country can take the Wind Country from the hands of the blood-clothed pavilion or not, once the war starts, Orochimaru will have more materials to conduct his own research. The Woodleaf Village will also have to do its best to support his research because of the war to enhance its combat ability. Even if the war hasn't started, large-scale military reserves will definitely be carried out. Orochimaru can still get enough resources from the hands of the Woodleaf Village to ensure his status and research with peace of mind. Looking at Terumi made dodging left and right, and looking at Orochimaru and AI's flickering eyes full of ambition, Gaara knew that he has parted ways with these people to a certain extent. In this case, Gaara naturally won't waste his breath here with the ninja allied forces. Instead, he directly returned to the Sunagakure camp without saying a word. At this moment, Sunagakure was also directly ready to leave the ninja allied forces camp. Although Kitsuchi, as the agent of Iwagakure, couldn't completely make the decision for Iwagakure at this moment, he also knew that the other villages can't be counted on at this moment. He directly returned to his camp and told the higher-ups of Iwagakure about the reality of the situation. He directly went to the ninja allied forces camp where the wounded were recuperating and picked up Inoki, who was in a coma. It didn't take long for them to leave the ninja allied forces camp. Watching the two villages of the Earth Country and the Wind Country leave the ninja allied forces camp one after another, Orochimaru also looked at Terumi, Mei, and AI standing opposite him and said, "It seems that it's unrealistic to expect Sunagakure and Iwagakure to fight with us against the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I don't know what you two think. I think if we directly gather our most powerful forces at this time and launch a direct attack on the Blood Cloak Pavilion's camp, there's a great possibility that we can directly kill Nangongja and make the Blood Cloak Pavilion leaderless, making it easier for us to act in the future." Orochimaru's voice at this moment was full of undisguised temptation. It seemed that he really hoped that Terumi, Mei, and AI could directly attack the Blood Cloak Pavilion with Woodleaf Village. In fact, what Orochimaru said at this moment was very tempting, but thinking that it was because of Orochimaru that the Blood Cloak Pavilion got enough opportunities to attack the Wind Country and Earth Country, and Orochimaru's expression at this moment made them feel uneasy. Although Terumi, Mei, and Terumi, Mei didn't directly refuse. After returning to their camp, they directly began to order to be ready to evacuate at any time. Looking at Terumi, Mei, and AI leaving, Orochimaru's mouth directly raised a mocking smile. But they're all cowards. They were just slightly stimulated by my attitude, so they went back directly. Little did they know that your moment of hesitation and even giving up actually gave the Blood Cloak Pavilion a rare opportunity. Haha, I hope that with the participation of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, this world won't be as boring as before and will become more colorful. What kind of sparks will blossom from the collision between a ninja and an internal force cultivator. Is Sasuke's choice right or wrong? It's really interesting to the extreme. Looking at the big tent of the ninja allied forces that was originally filled with heroes from all walks of life, at this moment, only sand and desolate tables and chairs were left on the ground. Orochimaru not only didn't feel nostalgic, but instead his eyes became even brighter. At this moment, Orochimaru was quite a bit like Uchiha Madara, but the goals of the two were different. In comparison, Orochimaru's goal wasn't so much of a rebellion, and it was easier to succeed. Chapter 794. In the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp, Nangongja looked at the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion who had completely evacuated, and then looked at the last piece of information in his hand with an imperceptible smile on the corner of his mouth. The information written on this piece of information was actually very simple. It was a piece of information about Sunagakir's old man, Hailaozo, entering the ninja allied forces camp. In fact, after seeing such information, Nangongja knew that the Blood Cloak Pavilion's victory was already in their hands. No matter what decision the ninja allied forces makes, or what decision the people of Iwagakure and Sunagakure make, they can no longer stop the Blood Cloak Pavilion's plan from being completed. Everything has come to an end. Putting the paper in his hand on the oil lamp, the flammable paper was directly burned by the flames at this moment. Throwing the burning paper casually, Nangongja said to Mashiro, who was standing beside him, "Mashiro, it seems that it's time to leave." Nangongja put his hand on the hilt of the sword of Heaven's Tribulation, injecting a large amount of his internal strength into the sword and constantly guiding the force of nature into the sword. A very mysterious wave was directly emitted from the sword. Pulling the sword out of the scabbard, the internal strength and force of nature that had been accumulated in the sword directly burst out at this moment. The two forces collided and directly tore a small crack in the world barrier. Stretching out his hand, Mashiro also tacitly stretched his hand directly into Nangongja's hand. Looking at Mashiro, the smile on Nangongja's face became more intense. Holding Mashiro's hand tightly, Nangongja directly pulled Mashiro into the space gap created by Nangongja. When Nangongja and Mashiro's figures disappeared, the flame on the burning paper that Nangongja threw out didn't extinguish. Instead, it spread directly after touching the ground. That's right. After all the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion evacuated, the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion camp was directly filled with flammable materials. Nangongja was actually prepared for both sides. Once the ninja allied forces launched an attack on the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongja could use these flammable materials to directly cause the final damage to the ninja allied forces before leaving. However, after waiting for so long, the ninja allied forces still didn't attack the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Nangongja was also too lazy to wait for the ninja allied forces to make a move. After all, such a sudden attack may cause enough damage to ordinary troops, but it was still slightly inferior to the ninja allied forces that could use various types of ninjutsu. After using water-release ninjutsu and earth-release ninjutsu, this kind of ordinary fire could be quickly controlled. The more he thought about it, the more Nangongja felt that staying here was simply a waste of time. Therefore, after thinking about it for a while, Nangongja directly made up his mind to directly go to the battlefield of the Wind Country and the Earth Country to command on the spot. The flame spread directly in all directions. Whenever the flame passed through a Blood Cloak Pavilion camp, it would be directly stimulated by the flammable materials inside and become more violent. After a while, the flame had become so big that even though it was still daytime, it was still so conspicuous. The ninjas and the ninja allied forces were not incompetent. Because of the sudden departure of Sand and Rock Village, there were some discordant voices in the ninja allied forces. But in the face of foreign enemies, the ninja allied forces were still united. Almost after discovering that the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp suddenly had a big fire, the ninja allied forces immediately came to the vicinity of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to investigate. Because of the obstruction of the fire, the advanced troops sent by the ninja allied forces couldn't directly invade for a while. After discovering such a situation, they immediately reported it to the Ninja Allied Forces headquarters. The Mist also immediately sent a team of water ninjas directly to the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. The 4 water release ninjas worked together to cast the water release ninjutsu. Although the fire was very big, after the efforts of the 4 of them, the fire was quickly extinguished, revealing the ruins of the building. Judging from the residue, it can be judged that there is no trace of human activity in the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. The disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion have obviously left the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp in advance. The advanced troops of the Ninja Allied Forces were very agile and directly cleaned up the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp, which had been turned into a charred black area, and directly found no less than 20 tunnels. These tunnels lead to everywhere. Obviously, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion also directly left the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp in such a primitive but difficult-to-find way. Orochimaru, Terumi Mei, and AI also hurriedly came to the hinterland of the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. Seeing the ashes and the more than 20 tunnels left by the Blood Cloak Pavilion, their faces became very strange in an instant. Who would have thought that the Blood Garment Pavilion would use such a primitive method to quietly leave the camp and launch a sneak attack on the Kingdom of Wind and Kingdom of Earth? Damn it! AI was burning with anger at this moment and directly punched a burned pillar. The pillar that was burned by the flames became extremely fragile at this moment, and AI's bombardment directly smashed such a pillar into pieces. Terumi Mei's face was gloomy at this moment, and she didn't say a word with a cold face. On the contrary, Orochimaru, who has always been called Lung Kun, had a relaxed look on his face at this moment, and even had a slight smile on his face. It was as if he had suddenly discovered someone else's cheating method when playing a game with others. He had a sense of excitement, as if he had discovered someone else's secret. Such a battle ended with the silence of the Ninja Allied Forces and the withdrawal of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. But there is no doubt that the Blood Cloak Pavilion has become the winner of such a battle. With such a battle, the Blood Cloak Pavilion has directly taken the Wind and Earth country into their own hands. As long as they can block the final counterattack of Sunagakure and Awagakure, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's plan can be considered to have been implemented. On the contrary, the Ninja Allied Forces suffered heavy losses at this moment and directly lost 2 allies, and there was no gain at all, which made everyone in the Ninja Allied Forces very angry, but there was nothing they could do. Chapter 795. Although Sunagakure and Awagakure's counterattack had a certain impact on the Blood Cloak Pavilion's defense, it didn't cause too much trouble. Gaara and Kitsuchi went to Wood Leaf Village and Mist Village respectively. After all, the relationship between Sunagakure and Wood Leaf Village was very good, and there was a deep hatred between the Earth and Lightning Country, so they could only choose the Water Country, which had a relatively good relationship with them. Facing the remnants of Sunagakure and Awagakure, the Fire and Water Country welcomed them with open arms. After all, each country suffered a certain degree of loss in the previous battle. They needed some time to recover their strength and heal their wounds. Sunagakure and Awagakure lost their homeland, so Wood Leaf Village and Mist Village were happy to directly absorb all of them into their own system. Once Sunagakure and Awagakure were integrated into such a system, it only took a little bit of effort to absorb these 2 forces into their own ninja village. At this moment, Xianxia sat on the throne in the middle of the palace of the country of Earth. He looked at the 5 elemental altar lords and the many Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples who had performed outstandingly in the battle before him. Just a moment ago, Xianxia had given out rewards to these people. When everyone's rewards were over, Xianxia also stood up from his seat and swept his eyes across the faces of the numerous disciples standing in front of him. Xianxia also cleared his throat and said to everyone, "Brother Liu, I'm going to give you a reward. I started as an orphan in a small village, and by chance, I received the inheritance of internal strength. But although I received the inheritance of internal strength, it still didn't change the fact that I was an orphan with no one to rely on. Back then, my sister and I were squeezed together in a small room, worrying about our livelihood every day. My biggest wish at that time was to learn a way to feed me and my sister from the small town where we lived, and then eat meat whenever we want. Xianxia said, and everything he experienced slowly passed through his eyes. Ro, who was also standing in the hall, looked at her brother who was standing taller than everyone else. At this moment, her eyes were slowly filled with tears, remembering the simple and difficult times of those years. Later, when I had some achievements in my cultivation, I began to have an idea in my mind. Can I make use of my cultivation to make a living? In a ninja world, there are many ways to make money by violence, but there are only a few ways to accept my strength at that time. In the end, I chose to find a way to become a ninja. At that time, in the small town where I lived, there happened to be a Hitaki from the Wood Leaf Village, and under his recommendation, I became a ninja in the Wood Leaf Village, one of the 5 most famous ninja villages in the ninja world. Thanks to the blacksmith shop owner in the small town, Uncle Hitaki, who gave me the opportunity to go to the Wood Leaf Village. Although I became a ninja and earned a lot of money from the missions, but at the same time, I also paid a lot of price. I had to use a lot of dirty means against my heart to complete my missions. The blood in my hands became more and more, and I also got the nickname Yama in the ninja world. Perhaps for others, such a title is an extremely glorious thing, but for me, it reminded me again and again of the fact that I am a murderous devil. Killing people is not a sinful thing, because in an environment like the ninja world, as long as you want to protect yourself, you have to kill people for various reasons. But when you go against your heart and kill people for no reason, just to ensure that you can get money, the guilt becomes stronger and stronger. But I have no choice. I can only kill people, because if I don't kill people, I can't live. Perhaps it was because he went against his heart again and again that Xianxia finally chose to give up the identity of ninja. But this period of time as a ninja was not just simple torture for me. It was because of this period of time that I was able to get friends and my other 2 family members, Mashiro and Little Linger. It was because of my sister Ro, my family members Mashiro and Little Linger that I was able to not let the guilt in my heart directly devour my heart. With that, Xianxia's eyes also became unprecedentedly gentle, looking at the 3 family members he mentioned. But in the end, because of various reasons, I couldn't stay in the Wood Leaf Village anymore. In order to protect myself and the responsibility of the Sword of Heaven's Retribution, I came to the Blood Cloak Pavilion and passed the path of dragonization step by step to become the leader of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I have never liked to take responsibility so much, so I directly added such a heavy burden on my shoulders. Step by step, I've been carrying such a heavy burden all the way to where I am now. The Blood Cloak Pavilion also directly became a giant in the ninja world step by step from Hidden Force. From now on, internal force cultivators will no longer be ignored. We proved to the whole world that internal force cultivators are not worse than ninjas, and even better than them. Today, we have rewarded all the people who have made contributions, and I believe that most people have also received the rewards they deserve. From today on, the Blood Cloak Pavilion officially stands in the ninja world and becomes an existence that everyone in the ninja world needs to look up to. This is my Blood Cloak Pavilion. This is our Blood Cloak Pavilion. From today on, all the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion will be proud to be a member of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Now, let us all rejoice in our victory. All of this is what we have won with our own sweat, with our own blood, and with our own lives. Xianxia held the Sword of Heaven's Retribution in his hand and directly raised it high, and in Xianxia's eyes, tears were flowing, and there was no way to stop. The book was finished. You're tuning in to the Eternal Immortal Ballad YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.